Okay, and this is interview number 4. I am here with Lucy Keogh, a trans woman. She has offered to do an interview on some of the questions from episode 7 of An All-American Nightmare, War of the Wardrobe. I'm going to turn it over to our resident queen here, and she can tell you about herself.
Hi, how's it going? Pleasure to be here. I am a 32-year-old woman of trans experience, and excited to kind of talk and discuss these questions.
Fantastic. Okay, so do you have any of your social media stuff or anything you want to tell the fans in case they might be interested in looking up? More about you?
Yeah. If you want to look me up on social media, you can look up Pink Zelda or Black Bee Tattoos on Instagram. That's the best place to look me up, and then you can find all my stuff from there.
Fantastic. And so I've told you a little about it, but I'll refresh this for the listeners. The episode was talking about some of the issues that we have in America with the very... I would say draconian, but I've been told it's a little dramatic, dress code that occurs in American schooling. And so that's kind of what we're here to talk about in your personal experience. So I'm going to read you a few questions here, and then if any of the questions get you don't want to answer them or whatnot, you can just say pass. If you need some elaboration, we'll go into that. And then at the very end, we're going to do some applications so you can see how the dress code appears. But the first question I always like to ask before we even get started is, what kind of 4 words would you use to describe the dress code just off the bat, or your experiences with it?
Restrictive and oppressive.
Yeah. That's 2.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Get too antsy. Never was good at math either.
All right. So restrictive and oppressive. Would you also say that it's not gender affirming, but kind of gender restricting?
Very gender restricting. That's part of the restrictive aspect for sure. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay.
Clothes don't have genders.
Exactly. So do you think dress code is really needed in a school beyond what the social norm would dictate?
No, I don't believe so, honestly. Within certain restrictions, obviously, for societal, interactions. But really, no. The fact that they restrict certain expressions, especially within children when you're the most expressive, really seems like an inhibitor to development of young ones,
Did you ever get cited for breaking dress code in school, and if so, what were some of the more common violations?
Yeah, a couple of times when I was younger. I didn't go to a lot of school, though. Mm-hmm. Former disclosure, only. But there was a couple of times for certain clothing that didn't look well enough repair or something like that, or it was too the subject matter or the design was offensive, even though it was only just discoloration. It could have been blood, but it wasn't. It was just abstractions,
sure.
So baasic restrictions just on interpretation of what they thought it was, So it's there was nothing wrong with the clothes. It was just a T-shirt. It just looked like there might have been, it was like a color splotch kind of thing. Almost like a Rorschach.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Thing. So kind of had that on it. Mm-hmm. And I love Rorschachs because I think they're just cool looking. And they thought it was too aggressive and offensive. So I got written up for that.
So it's funny you say that because when I was in high school, although my hair is pretty long now that I grow it out, I used to have everything shaved except for the pleat. Mm-hmm. And then I had about a mohawk coming about 8 inches off my head that curved forward, and it was moon white, and I basically soaked my head in peroxide to get to that point in time.
Oh, yep.
And I had teachers that would actually be that's very distracting. And so I would put on a hat, and the hat's even, the hat's distracting
you can't
too.
Wear hats in here.
And so I'd say, okay, well, which one's more distracting, the hair or the hat? And they're the hair. I'm so we put the hat on. There was never a day where I wasn't in and out of the principal's office. But it's funny you bring up this T-shirt Rorschachs because there's actually, I'll talk about it maybe later on, but one of the dress code handbooks, it was an actual handbook that we got from one of the schools that a teacher in Alabama sent me, was 2 columns, size 10 font, Times New Roman, single-spaced, front and back, for 12 pages of brands, bands, and iconography that students could not have on their shirts. Everything from Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Teletubbies was one there.
Yep.
Rorschach tests were also on there because it was considered psychologically inducive to children.
Oh.
And I thought it was really funny. I'm so the Rorschach test is not considered psychologically conducive, but everything else that happens in school is perfectly fine.
Yeah, totally okay.
The literal machine for pigs that you have developed over the past 200 years is, that's soul crushing. That's fine.
Yeah, that's
just
okay.
Can't have a psychological beat down.
Yeah, you can't make them think.
Right. What would Freud say?
Yeah, right.
So do you think should students get a say in a federally implemented dress code, that they kind of get to argue on things if there was to be a dress code implemented?
Oh, I 100% would say so. Yeah, I think that, especially if it's any human has a voice and a right to voice that opinion. That's what democracy is. Everybody voices their opinion, and then overall decisions are made.
It would also help with, as the social changes go. So,
well, exactly.
If new clothing trends come into parlance.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that never changes is all things change.
Right.
And that's something that constantly has to be looked at, updated, and discussed. A lot of people think they can just make standards and go with it, but...
Mm-hmm. And we see right now that there's a teacher in Canada, in Ontario, which I like to call the Mississippi of Canada, that she's actually trying to be the PTA is trying to get her removed from her job because she listens to Iron Maiden, wears Iron Maiden t-shirts on Casual Friday.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, where's that principal when I was in school?
I just was reading an article the other day about a math teacher that was in trouble because he would wear metal music shirts to school and talk to kids about it because of the aspect of how math equates to certain metal genres of music and how just math equates to music in general. He got in a bunch of trouble because it's inappropriate and things.
And the new one now that I've heard is that, especially with heavy metal, is that they can't really push the Satanist aspect with it because the Satanic Panic is officially over. But one of the things they are pushing is the fact that Judas Priest, I do believe their lead guitarist, was gay. And I always thought it was funny when I asked people, I'm like, so think of 80s macho man, what do kids think? And a lot of kids I had in my class were tight leather pants and guys with their abs hanging out and the leather vests riding in on Harleys and Oakley sunglasses and big old beards. I'm like, so that archetype, the heavy metal archetype, the look, started with Judas Priest. And they go, yeah, I'm like, and the man who started that was gay. It's so your parents that ran around with long flowy hair and leather chaps.
Well, yeah, and look at Freddie Mercury and a lot of other figures from those time periods. It's amazing how they didn't connect dots and things. And a lot of people totally underappreciate the contribution of queer culture to culture in general.
Right.
As far as art and music.
I was laughing so hard about it too because someone saying, I think it was Freddie Mercury that the movie about him came out with Rami Hayek, and everyone's like, I had no idea that Freddie Mercury was so openly gay, and I was like, really?
Well, you don't know them very well then.
Is it just a thing us LGBTQIA people have? We can sense each other, we have the telepathy.
Yeah.
Do you have the kala?
Little queer R.
The queer R.
It's kind of fun. Me and my partners were talking about that the other day because we had just met some other people and we were talking about that communication without communication of queer people in public and stuff in some instances because we were at the at this arcade place and there was visible panic between both of our groups and it was just total gay panic. Right. We were like, oh my god, look at them, and they were like, oh my god, look at them, and without even saying anything, it was kind of funny.
Safety in numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So we all came up and like, y'all, yes.
The best part is when you have that happen and you kind of have that connection and you start to cohese as a group and then the heteros come in.
Yeah, and everybody's like, what's going on here?
And then I'm the one of the people that unzips my sweatshirt and take my shirt off, my jacket off, and they'll have a shirt that I have that says these heteros are making me upsetteros.
Oh yeah.
They're kind of well, I guess we'll just leave them the
heteros.
We're not your unicorns.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah, the unicorn hunters.
So do you know that schools do not have to report violation numbers to outside parties? As they would with detentions or out-of-school suspensions, that it is all internally regulated.
Yes, I did know that.
Okay.
As far as the internal regulation, because of that word everybody likes to use, freedom, and they really misunderstand it. With that, letting each county and other things do the environment and other variables police their own aspect of what's appropriate, because that gives some rural parents the thoughts, I guess, that they control their environment.
Mm-hmm. It's also bringing that up because one of the episodes we're getting to, although my fans are very excited for it, is the PTA episode. Fans, just a small spoiler alert, it's going to be a 3-parter. The amount of content I have in that research document would make for an 18-hour episode, so it's a lot, and that's just within since the 1980s.
Looks like we're pulling an all-nighter.
We're gonna, this is a marathon. My computer will have the metaphorical train ran on it. But one of the things that we had is that you are correct. A lot of rural parents actually have voted to keep those internal systems regulated because if you don't have to report it to a higher committee, you don't have any oversight coming in and checking up on it. And this is also how you have like, for example, when I was 14, I used to go shop at Spencer's and Hot Topic all the time.
Oh, yep.
And I would have a teacher be walking in the mall, and they'd see me and be like, if you don't get out of here right now, we're going to call your parents and they'll know where you're shopping. And I would just retort with, who do you think gave me the money to shop here? I'm 14 years old. Stay awake, computer. So it's good that you know that. Not a lot of people do.
Yeah, I ran on that one pretty early because there's a couple pieces of tire that were kind of politically orientated and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was only an issue within that community. Right. And I knew other schools allowed it. And I was like, why is it okay here but not here? And it was just in the same state but different counties. Mm-hmm. One was a college town county. The other one was rural farms county. Right. And I was like, huh. And then someone was explaining it to me. I was talking to one of the teachers, like, oh, yeah, no, that's all like voted on here and this and that. And I was like, so there's no standardization on this? Y'all just doing whatever you want?
Welcome to America. There's no standardization? Never was.
Exactly.
Based on the data we have, do you know that boys break dress code 4 times as often as women, yet the dress codes are on average 70% of their content is restrictive to specifically women's attire?
100%, yes. 100%. Because I knew people when I was younger in school that had worn almost similarly matching outfits, and then the girl got penalized, and the boy, they're like, and you're like, but, and it was usually always the same thing. Oh, well, she's showing too much skin. It's like they're showing the same amount of skin. Y'all are just being a bunch of pervs.
We're only perverted when we have to see the women do it.
No, literally, there was a girl that was asked to leave one of the dances we had because she was distracting the men. You're like, that's a y'all problem? And then not the boys, the men, the married husbands. So you were like, what?
One of the arguments I made when I made this to the actual school board when I was teaching was parents would say that, like, yeah, if a girl wears a booty shorts, all the boys will be so fixated on her, they're not going to be like paying attention to their arithmetic. And I said, number 1, your boys don't pay attention to arithmetic class. I've seen their grades. Number 2, are we raising the next great leaders of America who are going to carry the torch, or feral beasts in need of castrating?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you raising? You're raising competent adults or people that need a leash. And their leashes is what they're trying to do.
And if your son comes to you and says, Mom, I just can't concentrate in class because the girl shorts are too short, have you considered a chastity belt?
Yeah, well, then talking to your kid about the fact of appropriate aspects of life. Okay, yes, I understand hormones and physiological biology aspects, but that's really a very minute aspect of the subconscious compared to being able to control yourself.
We're not beasts of our lesser
nature. Exactly.
We are not the beasts of the southern wilds.
Yes. Well, and that's that whole nihilistic aspect and thought process. It's like, no, that's not. We're humans. We know we're better than this. Let's actually teach our sons that they're better than us.
I've heard that become the new argument by men, is that, like, well, I'm nihilistic, so it doesn't really matter. And I always respond with, okay, well, I'm a hedonist, and I'm in charge. And I've had grown men that go, what's a hedonist? I'm like, it's like a nihilist, but you get to orgasm on occasion.
Yeah, right.
So
dress
code often expands into hairstyles, color patterns for fabrics, and up to...
Yep.
So do you believe this is clear and blatant overreach, or do you think there's some grounds to it?
Clear and blatant overreach, because it's usually used against POC individuals. That's the primary aspect on the color expression restrictions or the hairstyles. It's all against minority communities. Yeah. You don't see a lot of those aspects or certain things when you see like white habitus communities. Even if you look through their dress code conduct, you won't find certain things about them. It's non-existent. But then you go other places, and there's, like you said before, entire pages about different hairstyles that are and aren't acceptable. And you're like, what does that have anything to do with teaching a child?
So one of the things I found out from the Nez Perce, Snohomish, and
Yeah.
I do believe I have a guest speaker who's going to come on from the Navajo tribe, but I do have to work out a specific date for her. And she was actually mentioning that she could not wear, even to the point of wearing earrings that had beadwork done.
Yeah, 100%.
She couldn't have her braids.
Yeah.
And I've also found this, I've had a lot of friends who are people of color. And so I always learned that a do-rag was something, it was like a hair accessory, the same as a hair curler. You use it to put waves in your hair. And so when someone goes, oh yeah, it's a gang affiliation.
To maintain. I've traveled most of the U.S. I used to live down in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. I've lived in Alabama, Arkansas. So I'm pretty versed on some of those things, and why it frustrates me so much is because, yeah, some individuals, though, they have to do ridiculous things to themselves and their hair every day just to be able to not get hassled at school, which is a huge inhibitor to the learning process, and it's such a big distraction to have to deal with those things. And it's, don't get me started. It's ridiculous.
I think one of my favorite ones was when I was working on a firing range. I did wear a do-rag, but I also had, my hair was completely bald, and that was mostly just because it was hot. You could soak it in water and tie it on.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of purposes for head coverings. There's multiple different reasons there. Even when I was in Montana, and there's a lot of the native boys couldn't have the longer hair stuff.
Right.
Or they were made fun of so much they couldn't do that. So it really, especially those codes of dress attire, are really very targeted.
Right. So dress codes are often cited as, quote, preparing children for the working environment, end quote. If this is the case, shouldn't dress codes be more reflective of actual businesses?
In certain instances, I do believe. There's a certain aspect of attire needed for certain, certain work things. But a lot of work doesn't require that, and personal expression can be completely fine. In my opinion, at least. Just because there's a big issue with depression in a lot of jobs and the monotony of things and lack of stimuli within workspaces. So the ability to have expression and be able to do that and not think that it's out of place or told it's a distraction just creates a more positive experience and an ability for people to find more positivity in their day-to-day routines and things.
Right.
That individual expression and stuff that sometimes when they don't have it, it sucks going to the same job, doing a bunch of the same thing, or office workers and things like that. Sure, you want certain uniformities, but for what?
And we've actually seen now that with the pandemic and people living at home that people
had no effect on work efficiency.
Right, and people who can dress how they want and are comfortable actually have higher happiness ratings.
Exactly, they're more productive, they're more interactive in group meetings and other kinds of things
And I have a bunch of T-shirts. One of my favorite T-shirts is one that has the lettering, "My body is not a billboard, my sexuality is not a sale pitch, my existence is not an enterprise."
Oh, yep.
And I've worn that one around, and there have been people that have done the whole, wow, I really like that T-shirt, and it's gotten people talking, and they want to buy them. So that's always a big thing too, is that we can express a lot more about ourselves through our clothing opinions. And not to mention on top of that, but I work in a liquor store. I work in a brewery. And there are days when I have to throw kegs. Big, giant kegs. And so, my boss won't mind if I show up there with, suspenders down, working my undershirt and throwing stuff, because they recognize them. Of course, when the clients show up, you put on your nice shirt and you go out there. And that's kind of thing, too, is that, having two outfits at work, depending on the job you're going to be doing, is just something that's just kind of, my boss kind of thought it was weird at first, but then he saw, oh, no, this actually helps out a lot, because you're not getting your uniform all dirty. And so that was a big thing to me, too. But then I also felt at school, well, shirts can be political, but don't we want our students to be politically active? Okay, well,
we think we would.
Right. So it really comes down to that hypocritical. We want you to be politically active, just as long as you're in line with our politics.
And then conformity and on that perspective.
And I've seen schools that have actually flipped it the other way. Where in Texas, there's a school that. One of their staff members, who will remain anonymous, and as a journalist I have right to journalistic privilege of protecting my source, boys are allowed to wear pants, chinos, in one of two approved hues.
Oh.
They can have a button-up shirt in one of 3 colors, and they are allowed one of 5 accepted hairstyles.
Yep.
And I had people that are that's actually going to go, because then kids don't have to worry about their outfit. And I'm like, I'm sorry, are you going to pay for that haircut for me?
Oh, because exactly. And the upkeep and those, and a lot of times those schools have those dress codes and uniforms. They're not, they'll provide some of them, but then repairs and replacements and other things can be a discrepancy of how well they maintain those.
We've also learned it's a soft form of when schools had to desegregate in the 1970s, a lot of the ways that schools kept certain students out of schools was demanding they had to have a uniform, Or, if we couldn't use uniform because you have to kind of afford it, the other way they would get around it was we have to make a dress code, and then you would just set the dress code for items that most people of color couldn't afford. Or they were in areas where to even go to this upper area of town to buy these certain things would put themselves at risk. So, and it's also been done for students in kind of poor, troubled communities where as they're walking down the street, it's an attempt to show the factionary that, hey, this person's going to a higher tier school and to sow that discord, which ironically never really works because most of the people that I've talked to who have worked with people of gang relations, the gang-related people actually would take the students that have the higher tier classes and they would actually hold them in a protective status to the point where it was like one gentleman was telling me that his brother was a Crip, and because he went to a nice school and had nice outfits, the Crips and the Bloods would actually watch out for him. So if he was going and hang out with some friends, they'd be like, hey, you better go back to school because you're going to be representing us. So it kind of the exact opposite happened, where it was like, you're representing the best of us, so we don't want to be you messing around with this stuff. Yeah,
exactly. A lot of people have a misconception about certain POC communities and the fact that they tend to have this ideological sense that there's this lack of mentality or constructive support and other things, and that's totally not true. Actually, some of the most supportive and empowering individuals are people of color, because that's one of the few things that really, and they understand the fact of what that could give them and the opportunities that those things bring. I've seen that into with like Native individuals and stuff as well, and other kinds of things. I mean, at certain points, some of them will get teased and other kinds of things, but in majority, there's a much more support for some of those things within those communities than they would think. But it's just a ridiculous standard, and that travels over into other trans aspects as well.
Schools very often levy women's clothing as distractions largely without evidence. Do you think the violations should be subject to an appeals if
We've all agreed that that's not how things should work.
Which also helps having a third party oversight.
Exactly, and then that's exactly the point, is to have that, because if anything, humans have proven time and time again we're not good at regulating ourselves.
One can't hold yourself, shouldn't indulge.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that also kind of extends into men who or people who identify as men kind of choosing to adopt what is traditionally a women's clothing style. Is I kind of feel it's the same thing that like schools who obviously have a more conservative bent might alienate them, and then of course having that, I'm sure if we actually start having an oversight committee to check this stuff, we'd see a massive amount of transphobia appear in schooling.
Oh, massive amounts.
And that's mainly, and I mean it's totally speculation. I couldn't predict one way or the other, but I do understand that having worked with teachers, the concept of trans, just the general concept of transitioning from one gender to another, completely escaped most people.
Yeah, well, the whole concept of transition kind of escapes people overall, especially when it comes to youth, because a lot of people misunderstand transitioning. Transitioning is a medical process, as far as a medical transition, and there's social transitioning. Now, a medical transition is completely something up to an individual. It has nothing to do with your transness, or if you're trans or not. It has nothing to do with your gender either. You either are trans or, questioning or not. So a lot of people misconstrue those two facts, and especially when it comes to when they're thinking about younger children, they think that, you're this gender and you're switching to this one. It's like, well, no. As a trans woman, I'm always a woman. It's just I'm medically transitioning to have certain physiological aspects to better represent that for social lubrication. And a lot of trans people, I mean, the transition's more for the social aspect in certain things. Obviously, it's for you. But so, when they inhibit children on their expression because they're confused about the transition, that's them. That's their problem. And that's something that's just completely unacceptable, because a social transition is what children are mainly doing. They're not taking hormones, they're not getting surgeries, they're just expressing themselves for how they feel.
Right.
And so when teachers come into dress codes, because I can remember when I was younger and other individuals I knew, they'd be like, well, that's just not appropriate, you're wearing that. And you're like, why? It's like, I mean, she's wearing it, and it's okay, she does. And so it's really that aspect of where they're just, the nuances and misunderstandings travel to multiple different indifferences. I mean, they think the one thing is all about it, but it's like, no, there's so many variables that so many people even take the time to try and learn.
And I mean, I've had students that have come forward with believing they were trans, and I try to set them up with, okay, well, here's like a person you should talk to, because while I am a biology graduate, I don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
It wasn't like
a specific study range.
Well, you're a doctor. I'm not that.
Not that. That's another thing a lot of people misconstrue. Like I was just saying, is that there's general fields and then there's specializations.
Right.
That's the best thing any young person or any teacher can do with a young person questioning, is to try and give them the resources to get in contact with people that are educated and able to properly help them. A lot of people think young kids can just do a lot of things. Like, that's not how it works. Bone density thing that will go over with the parents, with the children, before anything is ever decided on.
And not to mention that, as most of the side effects that you would run up to, there are treatment options.
Like I said, for like trans boys, if they stop the puberty blockers and then get on the testosterone, the bone density aspect gets, the testosterone has an effect and other kinds of physiological effects happen, and it increases. For like trans women, that's a little bit of a different aspect where it's a little bit more of a concern, because obviously due to lack of testosterone, AFAB or cis women generally have aspects of bone density. That's another reason skeletals are different. So it's basic science that really, if you understand it, it's not inhibitor, and as long as there's precautions and you're taking your proper nutrient upkeep, which most people don't do good on, you can offset, and it's not any lifelong or problematic issues arise from those things. It's well proven. You can look at several different medical journals on it.
You're putting a lot of faith in people's basic understanding of science. I'm not going to lie.
I'm a rational optimist, and unfortunately most humans are scientifically illiterate, but I like to try and hope that at least maybe if you make them think, that they'll become more scientifically literate, or at least try to look into it. But then again, I'm a rational optimist. Trust me, I'll sign a couple of my opinions. And you're like, that's some high hopes, honey.
I have the highest hopes for humanity.
Yeah, I do.
I have the lowest expectation for humans.
Exactly. I have no expectations of anything, but I hope hard.
Right. Let's see. Do you think there is any merit behind the idea that dress codes exist as an unofficial uniform policy to allow the discrimination of people of color and to that which is considered non-white?
So you're asking if it was made to discriminate against that?
Yeah, is there any merits behind that claim?
100%. It's proven. Native American and indigenous those trade schools. What was it? Like the ones in Canada. Where they were
the boarding schools.
Yeah, the boarding schools. They couldn't speak their native tongue. They had to dress a certain way. They had to cut their hair a certain way. That's some of the like you mentioned earlier with in America with the black communities. Literally at one point in America, that was the black test was looking at your hair, and if you had curly hair and things.
Nappy hair,
I was like, oh my god. So when you think about those variables, you're like, well, how could it not?
I was amazed because of the amount of people that I know who were raised in Catholic school, and I spent some time in Catholic school. When that boarding school information broke out, and everyone was, "Oh, you're so shocked!" I'm like, clearly none of you remember Sister Francine Dementia whipping you with a ruler every day.
Yeah.
I was born left-handed writing, and they used to tie my hand behind a chair so I write right-handed.
Yeah, when I was a child, my home religious orientation, they weren't Catholic, but using your left hand they would call me the arsler. They'd be like, oh, that means you're arsler, and you're like, what?
So do you actually know where that comes from?
There's some studies they say it has to do with certain aspects of hormonal instigation in gestation.
Oh, no, I mean the distrust of left-handed people.
Oh, no, I don't know about that one.
So in Greek, the word for left is sinistros or sinister.
Yeah,
and the reason why is because
okay.
when someone shakes your hand left-handed, it's like doing the cross your fingers. And it's funny because in organic chemistry, when a molecule has a left hand rotation, it's called sinos, or a sinister rotation, because it's all Greek, and so
okay. I've heard a little bit about that, but I didn't know all of that.
Yeah,
okay. I've also heard that there's a aspect of cultural instance of it through some Middle Eastern cultures, due to cultural practices of eating with your right hand and other things you do with your left hand. So you being left-handed was just it was considered to be.
I've talked with contemporary Islamic people in academia, and they have said that has even into like unless you are literally way out in the boondoggles,
not something that's like carried on.
They just kind of see this. Oh, this guy's like they
okay. See, that's awesome.
Because we don't have handshaking. They kind of see it as like this is like it's kind of like the idea of like the Bedouins riding horses, where the women had those kind of like pants made up for them, while the men had long coats over top of them. They're like, yeah, we don't really do that anymore because like those clothes aren't necessary because we don't really use horses anymore.
Yeah. See, and that's what I was figuring, but that's like sometimes some ideas and practices, even though not done, have lasting psychological effects on certain individuals where people are like, I don't know, it just seems weird.
Very visceral carnal.
Yeah,
action.
exactly.
It's and if we get to the fingertip roll, we'll talk about that. But if it doesn't come up naturally, I will before the end of this explain.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We learned about the fingertip roll. I did a deep dive into that discussion.
Oh, okay. I'd be interested. I'm not sure I'm familiar with the fingertip roll.
So we'll get to it. Spoilers. I gotta keep the audience going. Do you think dress code should even exist beyond the social norm in any aspect, not just in schooling, just whatever society has deemed as socially acceptable, that's what we go with, and that we shouldn't have any type of major restrictions outside of like really formal events?
Yeah, I don't see a reason why we should. I mean, I think it's good that people should have that open expression. I mean, like we talked about before.
Gender abolition.
Yes. Well, because like we said before, clothes don't have genders. And unless it's like, you have a bunch of tassely stuff on, you're working around machinery or something, like unless there's a physical reason that you need to be attired a certain way, then there should be no standard, because that's not what it is. That's, I mean, obviously, unless there has to be a certain, obviously certain times and places for certain kinds of things.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to go out in the wintertime without a heavy coat
exactly.
on.
So like,
you wouldn't want to ride a horse without pants.
But at the same time, too, I really hate the fact of certain dress codes, because a lot of it's built around certain sexualizations of certain individuals' bodies, and the only reason that code exists is because of that objectification.
Right.
So you're like, yeah, it has no place.
Okay, so that's a perfect segue. So the fingertip rule.
Okay.
Where women would basically take your hands and you put them down at your sides.
Oh, yep.
And if your skirt is too short. So this originally came from, there was a trend within, particularly immigrant communities, but also people of color in general in New York, where people would wear their pants very, very high up and short because Levi's jeans were like very expensive, and so when you had one, you went until they basically went ratty.
Yeah.
And same thing in the country is that when people didn't have shorts, they would just wear their jeans until their jeans just naturally eroded like that. And these were considered, they were actually, their hot pants is a big one, but also men wearing them for like PT in World War II was very common.
Okay, gotcha.
So what eventually would happen, and there's a ton of short shorts around. I mean, German lederhosens are really short. They're the same.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So and I used to have a pair of those. So when it came to short shorts in the 1980s, it was kind of seems like, okay, well, this is something that like the immigrant populations wear, and like your butt kind of hangs out. And so this kind of seems like, oh, this is very degenerate in the sexual context. But it wasn't until the show Dukes of Hazzard came out and Daisy Duke had her short shorts that this was seen as like acceptable. Obviously, when a white woman was doing it.
Exactly.
A white woman built for the male gaze. And that's actually where she got the term Daisy Duke, which is a very clear sign of cultural appropriation. But as far as skirts went, there was a famous kind of thing when pornography was really starting to get going in like VHS tape stuff. Which, ironically enough, the reason why we have VHS over Betamax is because it was years to shoot adult film on it.
The things we don't know.
Right? Well, how did the Wild West towns get started?
Yeah, right.
So what happened was there was a very famous movie that came out because like there was a big market for fetish pornography, and so but it was impossible to find like sexy Halloween outfits because so many like towns and cities were overrun with this like Puritanism from the Reagan administration that a lot of like sexy Halloween outfits were gotten rid of. If you even could find Halloween outfits, most people made their own. So what happened was that the adult film industries would use whatever they could get access to. Sexy maid outfits, which was actually French maid outfits used to be more adorned with like Baroque stylings. Like it was more about how fancy your clothes were versus how attractive your maid was. Because it was kind of an idea of like the French monarchy had so much money they could keep their lowest servants in such finery.
Yeah, exactly. The French were so.
The bunny girl outfit was from Gaslight Clubs and from the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah.
And then lingerie was good, but of course there wasn't a big market for it because Victoria's Secret was still like just a town in San Francisco. So what they found out was Catholic schoolgirl outfits because a lot of people had gone to Catholic school and that was a big selling point. So what they did is they would hem the girl's skirt up really, really high, and they would do like, meet me in the rectory type stuff. And so a bunch of essentially soccer moms watch this movie and were like, well, if girls see this, they're going to start wearing their skirts super high up. And so there was a bunch of back and forth among parent communities as to how short a woman's shirt should be. And it was finally it wasn't I think it was a cardinal, but it might have been, it's someone higher than a priest but lower than a hierophant in New Jersey, who basically just told some people to try on different dresses, and basically if you put your hands, if you're proportioned, because this is back in the 1980s and white people hadn't discovered what a booty was. You put your hands to your sides, and if your dress was at the tip of your fingers, it was the length that when you bend over at a 90-degree angle, your skirt will still cover your butt.
Oh, okay.
And that was just like a priest just happened to figure that out, and then went and told people about it, and that was where the fingertip rule came from. Now here's the biggest question. Why, back in the late 70s, early 80s, how would teenage girls get access to a adult film when Blockbuster still required you to get ID'd for them?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, not so much how your kids find out about it, but how do you know about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Is this one of those self-reports?
A Freudian slip.
Which, a lot of the stuff we were learning about with dress codes for my video, we found out, like, a lot of them came, like, straight from the mouth of Nancy Reagan. And it's always funny when you read those things, because...
Or that Anita whatever.
Weinstrom?
Yeah.
Weinstraub?
Yeah, she was that huge anti-queer woman from down in Florida.
So she came up too. So Nancy Reagan had one where she said allegedly, like, 2 black boys were in a locker room. They had pitched together enough money to buy some Nikes, and they got in a fight over whose turn it was to wear the Nikes. And then one kid pulled out a gun and shot the other one. And then, like, this story went all over the news. It was, like, taken off. 1,000 different versions on it. And I talked to my dad. My dad is 65, and he goes, yeah, I remember this on the news, and he actually helped me go back through at the local library and, like, find the newspaper article that covered this.
I love that.
So we looked back through police reports, and the first thing that came to mind is, if kids can't afford Nike shoes, how are they affording a handgun?
It's true.
And the second one was, I was like, there's no credible evidence for this. There's no police report.
Oh, yeah.
No kids were ever shot. So I was like, so even, like, the very white supremacist-centric cops who would make up this type of a story to cover their butts when this was allowed, like, where cops could still go into schools without any permissions, didn't happen. What I found out was the story was based off of a story that Anita Straub said in Florida, where 2 white women got in a fight for a 5th Saks Avenue mink coat, which, I'm not going to lie, I've seen the coat. It looks like someone shaved Chewbacca. And it was $2,000, and it was the last one on a Black Friday, and they got in an argument, they started smacking each other handbags, and then one pulled out a gun and shot the other one. And it was a 38 police special that her husband, the police chief, had given to her, which is why it didn't show up in a police report. And I was laughing, I was just laughing so hard, I'm like, so, like, this is like before Karens were a thing.
Yeah, literally, there's the pre-Karens.
The proto-Karen.
Yeah, right?
Question number 12. What do you think about the fact that in all schools polled, which we do have some preliminary evidence on these dress codes, we found that in schools, 7 to 12 teachers make up roughly 65 to 83% of dress code write-ups, not accounting for hall monitors nailing people, which are not actually staff members, they're not teachers, and then not accounting for the fact that some students would get double tapped for the same crime, so they go to one class, get nailed for it, go to the next class, get nailed for it again. So that's the range in there, but the hall monitors didn't count. So of that, it's about 7 to 12 teachers make up most 65 to 80% of the write-ups.
That seems relatively disproportionate.
Right.
It seems like there seem to be some real sticks in the butts.
Seems to be some people targeting students.
Yeah, very biased targeting.
And that kind of goes back to that list we were talking about where you had 12 pages front and back of just bands, brands, and iconography. As I said, no one's going to memorize that. That's just something you can use where you could nail a student and then retroactively go back and look through and see if you can get them,
for something else or whatever.
Which is making rules with the intent to cause a crime. But yeah, it was 7 to 12 teachers, predominantly white women, although there was a pretty decent mixture of white men in there as well. So I mean, does that kind of line up with your experiences with being dress coded?
Yeah. When I was younger, for certain expressions, there was I had a couple of history teachers. One of them was male, one of them was female, and they were like the worst about it. Obviously, being history teachers, they were a bit more conservative and about their ideological sense of life. Plus, this was in rural Montana, so they were definitely more peculiar about it. A lot of my other friends, yeah, a lot of the girls that I knew, it was mainly female teachers that would have issues with their dress code and be writing them up. Sometimes, that one male history teacher, he just went after everybody. Women were always being indiscreet, or not, too indiscreet, and what was the word? Harlots, I think was the word.
Oh my God.
Kind of thing. But he was that whole Violet Letter kind of style.
Oh, Scarlet Letter.
Scarlet Letter, that's the word. The Scarlet Letter kind of style, kind of person,
Ironic because like the whole point of that like book is like never let them see you cry. Like just if someone calls you a slut, just go and.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of folks really misunderstood that whole story. Weird, right? The cherry picking is prominent in certain rural communities and with certain white folk.
Mm-hmm. Second here. Do you feel the dress code is used as a weapon? And you kind of answered this. The dress code is used to crush children's attempts to discover themselves during their developmental years.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's used as more of like I think as a form of indoctrination methods.
Oh, okay.
It really kind of makes it to where, it kind of creates a good and bad, or an acceptable and not acceptable kind of sense for children. And that's just, there is no range when it comes to expression for those. Especially when it comes to things that aren't hurting anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely, I think, very stifling. Don't stifle the little one's spirits. That's what I always say. Just don't stifle them.
It's kind of interesting, too, because I've had a lot of people complain that is, like, Dr. Spock thinking. Or, like, you shouldn't, like, but I kind of have the distinction of, like, Dr. Spock said don't discipline your children. And now we have boomers. He didn't say don't, like, and also, like, there's a difference between letting your kids learn about things and develop versus reinforcing destructive behaviors.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
One of the things I bring up is, like, a lot of people, like, Vincent van Gogh was, like, he was crazy and insane. I'm like, because of the stresses of his life and his trauma that was not recognized at the time. And I don't hold it against French medical science at the time, because they're like, we've only just in the past 20 years really been able to identify some of the stuff with massive tech. So it's something I never hold like the plague, people during the Black Plague, for not understanding germ theory, because like, we didn't understand until 1950s.
Yeah, they were doing the best they could with what they knew.
They managed to figure out there was something to do with bad smells, so at least we got that far.
Yeah, right.
We knew it was something in the air, so give them points for that.
Yeah,
but, we kind of also noticed that when it comes to a lot of the older generations, the boomers, kind of equate that, well, if you don't give the kids this rigid discipline, they're just going to go crazy and be like really, really destructive and destroy everything. Which is funny because it's like, you didn't have rigid discipline and you pretty much messed up everything, which is ironic because I had so many boomers like, well, my dad used to punish me like this. I'm like, that, number one, statistically like unlikely, just judging from like the reports we have. And number two, if you knew it was wrong, why did you impose it upon your own children?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the parents are doing things like, you said you hated that when you were a child. Why are you doing it to your child? It has no actual effect. But yeah, that's something that I think within psychiatry and things, they've kind of proven the fact that rigid indoctrination with children is actually not healthy. In the fact that it doesn't make them as critical thinkers, it ruins their deductive cognitive abilities to like question and work through things.
Yeah.
Because they're told, oh, don't think and do this, and that's works for certain labor force aspects, in my personal opinion. But then again, why it was more heavily impressed upon certain POC communities, because of the fact of like, it's not about education, it's about indoctrination.
Yeah, and the big thing too is that, as I always remind people when I made a comment on TikTok and I had a bunch of people get angry at me, it's like, oh, these boomers, they just didn't know, and they're not that way anymore, and we should respect them. And I was like, you do understand the woman who yelled at Ruby Bridges and referred to her as the N-word on live television is only 66 years old, right?
Yeah, like literally. People don't realize how new some of these things are. I always like to tell a lot of my clients, especially when it comes to women's aspects within dress codes and things like that. We're only really 3 generations removed from complete patriarchal control.
we're still in that. I'm sorry. I'm going to challenge you on that one.
Well, yeah. Technically, like women, and it wasn't until 1962 had the ability to have a bank account without a man's permission.
Correct, yeah.
It wasn't until like 1969 to 1974 that women could even get their own line of credit without permission from a man. So, like, that ability...
And it really wouldn't be until, like, I think 1982 where you could have no-fault divorces.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't until, like, the late 90s...
As a national thing.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't until the late 90s and early 2000s that spousal rape was a thing. Mm-hmm. And things like, the fact of, like... and that's why I say complete patriarchal control. Because we're still heavily in patriarchal indoctrination and systemic issues and controls. But there are loosening aspects of things that we can take advantage of at this time period, to where our generation, well, at least for me, being the oldest of the millennials, is one of the first generations really truly bored into the available options to try and do some of these things to fight against some of those systemic issues.
And I'm actually, in history class, I explained to students that, because I would outline a typical housewife's day, and someone explained, like, how can anybody get up at 5, go to bed at, like, 11, and have that day and day? I'm like, so, and amphetamines were very popular at this point in time. And I said, this is why spousal rape was such a problem, is because, like, women would take an amphetamine to get, which is an upper, and I was like, then when you get home, when you're done, you need to take a downer to calm down, like, which, unfortunately, like, this is where we get into spousal rape, not to mention, like, when boomers would say, like, oh, you had such a hard day at work. I'm like, you used to be able to drink and smoke on the job don't tell
your fucking office.
And you were systematically less productive than the average millennial. The average, like, your workload was equivalent to a medieval peasant pound for pound. Millennials have a workload that is 4 times as aggressive as a peasant, and we do it without a lot of drugs. So
yeah, exactly. Well, and then with the spousal rape coming into that, a lot of women too, they would have these mental health problems that weren't really being fixed, and then trying to their therapist, and they would just medicate them, and other issues to, like, for compliance.
No loose wires.
Yes.
No way.
Like, you just did. Well, that feeds back into hysteria and all those things. Like, when it comes to mental health and women in general, it's disgusting. And so, we're the precipice. I call it growing pains, because society is really changing drastically within these last several decades on the fact of kind of how we perceive interactions with one another, how we perceive what's acceptable, and what's not, on every standard when it comes to interactions, clothing, sexuality, all of it. And it's exciting and terrifying.
Destination unknown.
Exactly.
What was the saying? We're a far cry from where we are, and a far cry from where we're going.
Exactly. We're in just the thick of it now.
Into the thick of it.
Yeah.
Should dress codes allow for special exceptions for trans and non-binary students, or should the general rules apply, as we said, ad populi? So again, that's where the students would advocate for it, or do you think, like, there should be a special category set up?
So that's difficult, because, like, a special category is really kind of othering in certain instances. Like, it's really kind of like, it creates that age-old American issue of them and us. And I don't really agree with that. I think that if you're looking at people and humans as standard acceptable, then that's just everybody as a group. We're not going to try and be like this and that. But that also goes back into that clothes don't have genders. So the only reason to be a special exception is because, like, when I went to school, dress code was, like, if you could not wear female clothes, like, you just couldn't. Like, literally, you would get written up. Kind of thing. So, like, that's an issue, and, like, okay, if it's in that area, then it's, like, that's not cool. But that's also because dress codes just aren't needed. So, no, I don't think it should be, but if somewhere doesn't have the availability, then obviously I would say as a segue, then there should be leniencies for certain individuals. Like, say, like, there's a uniform at school, and boys have to wear this and girls have to wear this. And it's whatever, semi-appropriate. But then there's a trans girl. So, like, that would be within women's dress attire. So, technically speaking, that would be a special exception as far as, like, oh, no, technically, this is and that's. So, as a segue, I could see an acceptability with it. But as far as, like, a goal or what should be, no, I don't.
So, kind of a stopgap measure?
Yeah, exactly.
So, this one I will disagree with you. I said that we should have a group set up, and yes, we're considering othering, but then I said that if we're allowing students to advocate for their own dress code, how easy is it for teenagers to be swayed by their parents into voting against this, and then you run into the PTA. But as ad populi, it's like, while the U.S. military may be okay with trusting teenagers with high explosives and assault rifles, I am not.
Well, like I said, it should definitely be more of a whole, like a whole populace look at, for sure. You know, it shouldn't be individualized the way it is, where it's each state and county and district gets to determine that. I think it should be, like I said, everybody should discuss it, and really the discussion shouldn't be about like what should be acceptable, but just the fact of like we don't need to regulate some of these things.
So it is actually kind of funny you bring that up, because up until 1992 there was never actually any regulated dress code. In fact, a lot of schools found it to be around the nation, a lot of schools found dress code to be very oppressive. So there was a lot of advocate from actually people who were in World War II. There was actually a bunch of World War II veterans who would actually go around and speak at schools. And they would said that when they said, do you think students should have dress code? They said, well, do you want to know who else had kids wear dress code? And they went, who? He goes, Hitler. So they were really against that, which is how in the 1950s, and I had my parents argue with me so much, like, well, we were kids, we had a dress code, and I said, Dad, I've seen what you look like. You had hair down to the back, middle of your back, and you wore platform shoes and wide and like bell-bottom jeans. Those were not acceptable in school, but you still have pictures of you in school wearing them. He goes, that was socially acceptable. I'm like, okay, so you admit the social norm works.
Yeah.
Same thing with the greasers with the the leather jackets. And I remarked on people as I said, well, the greaser jackets actually were not originally leather jackets; they were bomber jackets. And a lot of boys got them from their dads, because when their dads would go up and fly, they would leave their bombardier jackets. They had one for flying, and then one was like their dress, kind of like flashing.
Had a nice one.
And that was what boys got shipped home. So it was a way of like recognizing their dads. They would also wear their dad's dog tags because they lost their dad in the war. Rolling up your pants like that and wearing combat boots. Again, people didn't have a lot of shoes because of the war effort, so if your dad had boots, you wore his boots. And this is kind of a way...
So many kids back in that day didn't have shoes.
And that was kind of a thing of like, this isn't so much... And that was how a lot of students and teachers felt, was that these kids aren't violating a dress code, they're a walking memorial because they don't have parents. In the 1970s, it was, the counterculture, freeing oppression. In the 1980s, the heavy metal culture was really where we started getting the parental, the holier than thou arts, the moral majority group. And then in 1982, Bill Clinton, under the auspices from the moral majority during the Reagan administration, and on the heels of that story that Nancy Reagan told about the two black kids, he implemented a federal dress code, that all schools need to have a federal dress code. The problem was that was pretty much all he implemented. You need to have a dress code, but we're not going to tell you how, what, where, why. And then, of course, the PTA moves in because, flies are attracted to bullcrap.
Yeah, well, like most things with certain kinds of regulations, the feds will do their performative act of, no, we said something, y'all figure out the rest. And you're just like, that's not... We pay y'all a lot of money to do the figuring out.
When I used to work in a firing range, we had so many people that when the ATF said, okay, the federal law is a short-barreled rifle has a 14-inch barrel. We had so many people that came in and said, can you make us a barrel that's 14 1/10 of an inch? And I'm like, okay, I know what you're doing, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of not.
Yeah, but you're being obtuse.
Like if this was Francis Bacon paintings where it's very obvious like machines and people are the fuel source type stuff, but they're depicted as pigs, so people don't realize it's unionist propaganda. Also, it's really funny that kids never learn of Francis Bacon in school, not the painter. And I told one student, I'm like, why do you think when he has a literal painting called Feed the Machine that is about the Battle of Blair Mountain? And they were like, oh, really? Like, yeah, it's his most famous piece. And also like, well, it's blood and guts and gore. I'm like, yes.
Yeah,
it's almost as if the machine is feeding on you.
Yeah, some of the interpretive aspects and actual, like, portrayal of things is lost on a lot of individuals. We're just not taught.
It's incredibly selective, I've learned. People are incredibly cued into literary devices when it suits them, and then incredibly dull to them. I had once, the TikTok now where a lot of conservatives are saying, like, I don't have the vaccine, I'm a pureblood. And I was like...
Oh, God, yeah, I saw that the other day!
And I explained to them, I'm like, you guys do understand that pure blood is synonymous with inbred, right?
Yeah, they don't know what that means.
And someone's like, no, it's not. I'm like, purebred dogs are inbred.
Dogs, yeah. Purebred royals are inbred
royals. Do you know why Tsar Nicholas was crazy and his son had anemia? It's because he was married to his cousin.
Yeah, a couple, for generations, some of them.
Look at the entire population of Arkansas.
Oh, God.
Or, excuse me, Arkansas.
Arkansas. I used to live there. I know about that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, down in Little Rock area.
One of my favorite stories I used to teach when I was teaching about that was the pureblood thing and the monarchy. And there was a cartoon I would show where it was Tsar Nicholas coming in right at the council when Russia's about to pull out of the war, and he goes, "Good news, everybody! I've fired all my generals." And so all his cabinet generals are like straightening up and trying to like put their stuff on. Like, and who's going to be the new field grand marshal, my lord? And he goes, "It's me. I'm going to lead people to war." And all the generals are like, "You've never been in combat. Yeah. You got in a fight once and cried." In Japan, please no. And they're like, well, if you go to lead the war, who's going to lead? Like, if you go to war to fight the Germans, who's going to lead our glorious country, Russia, to support the war against the Germans? And then Tsar Nicholas goes, "Oh, that's easy. My German wife and her crazy wizard friend." Did I mention he's homeless? And it's like his wife and Rasputin like behind the covers of the bed, and everyone's like, "Is that true?" I'm like, the Rasputin thing, probably not. The wife being German thing, yes. And I've shown people like these long charts of like how like Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria like basically birthed the entire monarchy of Europe. And someone's like, "Wait, so Rasputin, like Tsar Nicholas is married to his cousin, and his cousin was married to essentially his father, and his father like had sex with his like stepmom?" I'm like, "Yes," and they go,
"Cis heteronormativity is really weird." When people really think about their like, most people are so ignorant to history though.
"Are the straights okay?"
Yeah. I don't think so. Well, yeah,
isn't it ironic?
If they're even straight.
Isn't it ironic how humans conducted estrus, which is where the female selects the male, for so long that worked, and the only two selective traits that we can de facto say was men who were intelligent and could build tools, and men who could divide the parental efforts. Like the man was smart enough to take care of the baby and not eat it.
Yeah, not
and then as soon as like we got to a society where we didn't have to worry about that, and the men started deciding who did and did not marry, we got inbreeding almost the next day.
Yeah, like automatically.
And now we're back to a point where women are showing a lot more selection in their partners in the modern day. And as a result, a lot of the more inbred society is like, we just can't get dates. And I'm like,
well,
thank you, ladies, for correcting a problem that unfortunately my sex kind of started.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how some of that works because like we said with some of them incel groups and stuff, you're just like you know you're supposed to like women.
Women select men for being big, strong, and having large Johnsons. I'm like, okay, we aren't breeding racehorses.
Yeah, it's not the like. Well, maybe at one point in history there was some of that selectiveness, but no, not anymore.
Well, actually, so we can de facto say no, and I'm a biology student, so one of the things I did a project on was the micropenis gene.
Oh, okay,
which is on chromosome 3.
Oh, okay,
and we've discovered that the micropenis, number one, because it doesn't extend all the way into the female's uterine canal, that they produce more aggressive sperm to go farther, which of course produces more robust genetic material. It also requires less blood to function, and it also requires less stimulation, which if you're a man mating with a woman out in the woods and a saber-toothed cat rolls up on you
need to be quick.
Also, it reacts more to amount of aggression produced during copulatory acts. Because humans didn't used to have monogamous pairings, at one point in time, I think during the Pleistocene mass extinction, there was only 400 breeding pairs of humans. So humans would have a huge, one tribe would meet another tribe. They would exchange partners, and they would have massive, essentially gangbangs.
Yeah, people don't know that. I love that.
And so it's like, so with this in mind, like you want to have a penis that number one is incredibly efficient, incredibly aggressive, because like if you don't blow and go, there's a line of dudes that will be up on you.
Well, yeah, and that's funny you bring up that point because. Yeah, a lot of that aspect of being big and strong is only about certain physical aspects for utilitarianism. It has nothing to do with genitalia. Right. Actually, most all the girls I know, including myself, yeah, the big genitalia, that's not a selling point for us, honey. It's not a selling point. That is actually an anti-selling point.
That's fun for 5 minutes, but tell me, can you start a car?
yeah, like, well, even that and even other aspects, like some boys are like, oh yeah, hitting cervix. And you're like, don't. That's, none of us want this.
I think that's a reflection on, like, students not understanding sex ed.
Anatomy. There's a good, like, the subreddit, Bad Women's Anatomy. Oh, and you're just like, did you go to fucking school?
Every year I taught biology class, I had to explain what menstruation was.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane how so many people... I have literally met 20-some, 30-some-year-old men in my chair. No clue. No clue. I mean, they understand that women menstruate, but they have no clue.
Right.
They're just like, icky, gross.
And these are the same people that are telling you the vaccine is not helpful.
Yeah, exactly. The same people are like, this is going to do this.
My favorite joke is, I know I've looked at all of these, like, reports from scientists who did statistics studies and dedicated their lives and free time to this to the study of these diseases, but the guy I knew in high school who failed entry-level biology and has sat on his couch for 20 years, he's got a pretty good idea too.
Yeah. But have you listened to him?
Right. Speaking of those types of gentlemen, which we have some quotes coming up, I'm interested in them. Do you think that part of slut-shaming, the social aspect, begins with the dress code, or do you think the dress code stems from it?
Oh, that's a tough one, honestly. I think it stems from it more of, in my personal opinion, just because, like, that Puritan ideological sense within a lot of, like, early American culture, and like that visibility and women's expressivenesses and things was initially, I think, where a lot of that slut shaming comes from, and then I think that really carried over into, like, dictating those dress codes. Like we talked about before, different communities have, like, really heavy dress codes for women. I mean, they don't have anything for men, but at the same time, I think it stems from those belief systems and indoctrinations.
Okay. And that's interesting you bring that up too, because I would say that while slut shaming is kind of like the background radiation of like much of white supremacist patriarchal society.
Oh yeah, that's that control.
The dress code specifically is like a tumor. Like, it's a concentrated form of it that metastasizes only because dress code is so moving. And the funny thing is too, is I've had students that have the butch lesbian look, where they're dressing incredibly covered up and in men's clothes that are very baggy and they're not sexual, and they still get claimed for a slut. Because they're trying to hide it from us. So in that regard, I'm like, this is more of a concentration of the slut shaming, because no matter, like, if it was just an aspect, it would line up more with cultural trends, but it seems to adjust with social climates.
I can see that. Yeah.
If there's one thing that white supremacist systems do, they don't take new information well.
No. So, adaptation is not their strong suit, right? Especially the new information.
Oh Lord. Did you ever feel experience, or did you ever feel the experience or have staff members making sexually suggestive comments to you or your friends based on dress in your school?
Not to me directly, because when I was in school, I was more closeted than anything. There was a couple of expressive clothing things, but that was more in, like, jest and humor aspects. Obviously on the surface, but not internally. But I did have several female friends and AFAB individuals I knew when I was younger that, they were heavily harassed and slut-shamed for, and even by faculty members would sometimes make very inappropriate jokes and just public shaming them, in the foyer areas and stuff, and so it's really a predominant issue. And I think even some of my younger clients that are, like, just graduating high school or in college have even expressed some issues with where, like, faculty members would be inappropriate about their attire for no good reason except for just to try to shame somebody or have a snide remark or something,
Well, it's also that power dynamic, which...
Oh, exactly.
And a lot of things with... And I've admitted to this, a lot of the people I work with in school, many of those teachers, if not outright sociopaths, like demonstrated extreme sociopathy. Mm-hmm. So, like, a lot of times...
I've read a little bit on some of that, and that's something I never actually thought about, because I've always thought of teachers as kind of like a kind individual.
Right.
But then once you start to look at the collective whole, some of them, you really get that authoritarian complex kind of going in with some of it.
What a shock. A bunch of sociopaths tricked you into thinking they weren't sociopaths.
Weird.
I'm not saying I smell a rat, but I certainly smell something fishy.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too, that I brought up with it is that the teachers will constantly seek a power control. One of the things I've noticed with students is, and I've made TikToks about it, is that when students are messing up, a teacher will bring them in and say, well, why don't you write down this piece of paper what you did wrong and what punishment you think you should be applied to. And I've always told students, do not write that down.
Yeah, do not.
Do not sign it, because that is an informal confession. It's the read technique, and they are using that because they don't have anything on you, but they're going to let you state it in there. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing, too, with students that will write down, like, well, my teacher groped me, so I slugged him, and they'll then go like, well, do you think that was a valid response? Like, shouldn't you have come and gotten a teacher? Which is another sociopic system because it keeps it self-contained. Because they have to report assault. They don't have to report sexual harassment.
Exactly.
So it's that keeping with the power dynamic.
Exactly, 100%. And then, like, especially the young ones, they don't have a foundation or argument to point or have any confidence to even try to argue that.
Or even know it's wrong in some cases.
Or even understand that, exactly. I had to deal with some of that when I was younger. So I know exactly that one way too well.
Female listeners and listeners who identify as female, take it from a former educator. If a teacher ever gropes you in a way or makes you feel uncomfortable sexually, simply inform them that if they continue doing it, you'll make their knees bend back the other way. That tends to put the kibosh on most things, I've discovered.
Yeah, standing up for yourself is a very effective technique. They really try to prey on submissiveness and compliance. The
more visceral the threat, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Really reach down into your inner John Wayne Gacy. It's also really funny, too, because one of the jokes that they teach you when you become a teacher is that they ask you in the interview, like, why do you want to be a teacher? And I always laugh because the sociopathic response that a lot of other teachers have told teachers not to say is, well, I love children. And I've done interviews I've sat in on an interview where the teacher said, like, I love children, and I kind of smirked, and they went, why? I'm like, do you know who else loved children? And they go, who? Like, John Wayne Gacy. I was like, P.T. Barnum loves children.
Yeah, right.
So did the guy who ran Oliver Twist.
Yeah,
we've all read Lolita, too.
Oh, gosh. That's...
The sad part is that's actually required reading in the school I went to. We had to read that.
Oh, my God. Yeah, the fact that they've...
Yeah, it was
Don't
really...
publicize that stuff.
I've advocated...
Made a movie about some of them.
Well, the movie I have my gripes about because in the book it's all in his head and the child is incredibly innocent the whole way through. Mm-hmm. Because the book was written as a critique of the gentleman. Oh. The movie is close to American Beauty and it's incredibly triggering for a lot of people, especially myself, being kind of a victim of that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I bring up with students is I say that you shouldn't make it required reading in school because a lot of teenage students won't be able to handle it. I do honestly think like I don't think there are some things that teenagers should be exposed to. However, I always recommend for everybody to read it once they get out of, once you get past that 21, 22-year-old gap, please read or at least listen to Lolita as much as you can because it does help you kind of get that sense of understanding sexualized trauma.
100%. For educational aspects of understanding, there's a lot of things that we don't want to have to do, but they are very helpful. And I completely agree and understand that aspect of them.
And another thing I bring up, too, is one of the shirts I've had for a long time and a saying I've had was from Emile Zola, which it's... I actually have one that's orange and has a bloody hamper on the back that says they were children. But on the front it says, until the last stone from the last church is brought low upon the last priest. And it was because a lot of the ways that I struck back when I started becoming more atheistic and more against organized mainstream religions, although never attacking spiritualities, was a lot of these systems use that to their advantage. Like, they don't teach the children, so the children are completely at the mercy, and obviously we've seen it numerous times. So one of the things that people tell me is like, well, when will you... I always had a teacher, and she said it, and I happened to be reading Zola in class, and I finally got to use it. It was my and everybody clapped moment. And she said, well, when are you, Gail, going to stop hating religion? When are you going to stop hating God? And I simply turned to her, I'm like, this is the moment. I said, until the last stone from the last church is brought low upon the last priest on Terra. And she's like, to the office.
Yeah, they don't like when they get confronted so heavily with those kinds of things.
Well, it was just like it's like I'm just angry God. It's like no, I'm an angry God. I want the whole system crushed, and as long as you persist, I will persist. Mm-hmm. And again, that was taking the power dynamic away because it was a sense of when you stop existing, I will stop existing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a direct reflection of you. You are a fuel to my engine, and that again removes that power dynamic.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of religious people don't understand that, and it comes in really into contrast with queer culture too, because a lot of them, because we have pride and we're quite loud about certain things. Like nobody cares. It isn't this isn't that, and you're like, no, y'all started this by caring.
Yeah.
And y'all did something here, and now we're like you, and now y'all are like nobody cares. It's like, well, somebody cares.
Well, and it was also funny because I've had students in a religious studies class that say like, well, God is a man. I'm like, so fun fact, I know most of you are Christian Unitarians, which is basically just I identify as Christian because I want to be on the in-group. But
yeah,
Jehovah is never specified as a male by him. He never identifies himself. He either speaks in the first-person infinite or in the third-person perspective. Humans just assume he's male. So technically your God is a non-gender binary association. Not to mention there's more transgender gods, and I do mean that in both a literal sense, like... most Indian gods have a male and a female form.
Yeah, exactly. There's a duality within a lot of ranges.
And I even said, Warhammer 40k, which does have cults dedicated to its gods, even though it's a tabletop game, has a god that is omnigenderist named Slanesh. So it's kind of like, is Slanesh a male, a female? I'm like, yes, and everything in between.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, it's depicted as like one half male, one half female. I'm like, yes, that's because in the 1980s they didn't have a word for what omnigenderist was. The closest you got was bilateral gynandromorphism, and that just doesn't fit.
that just roll off the tongue.
Right.
Very good. And that's another thing. A lot of people will hear terms used to express very old expressions, and then they hear the term and like, well, that just must be something new. It's like, no, it just defined now and has better articulative language and verbiage.
Well, we can't expect Christians to understand language evolving. The Tower of Babel story. Come on.
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
Cajun French has been around as long as the Roman Empire. My other fun one was the...
That's funny.
That's always one of my big proofs. And point to something that doesn't make sense in the Bible. I'm like, okay, explain French.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like languages don't evolve. And one of the things I laugh about is that hermaphrodite, which is the big word I like to use as an insult. Because they can't use the other ones. I referenced them that hermaphrodite was never traditionally used on people until the 1980s when church members from the moral majority would use them. Like traditionally it was used with frogs. Because
more of a science aspect,
right? Because we didn't know what parthenogenesis was or transmorphology of frogs, and even to this day, frogs turn from male to female. Thank you, Jurassic Park. It doesn't transition from a male to a female. No. It's just a female that grows an inseminating-like organ and then mixes its DNA within our frogs to commit to parthenogenesis to make a clone for at least one generation. This is a lot more complex.
It's very complex, and a lot of people they never pass their science or biology classes, and yet they want to think they understand science and biology. Like we said earlier, I'm
a biology student, trust me, I know.
Yeah, so it's amazing because I don't personally understand it or comprehend it. I can understand it because it's not relevant. The human's ability to absorb information due to relevancy is really crazy.
There's a faction I'm a part of, and I've had on my podcast called it's called Biologos Maximus, which is a biological camp that basically after World War II established itself as we are the gatekeepers of biology. We don't allow biology to be used for nefarious means. So we're not on the cutting edge. We're not very go out and do lab work. We're very refining what has been there and then applying it and advocating it into society to keep us on the straight and narrow. This has been taken as gatekeeping, and I will wear that badge proudly only because we did on our podcast. A lot of religious people say well, what about a teleological example of evolution? Or evolution's designed, so shouldn't it be done by engineers? I'm like, no, because engineers build for a specific trait. Evolution is reacting to an environment. When we start making evolution a pathway to go on, a path that is ironically advocated for by blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan men, typically, we start going down what's called eugenics. And I was like, and I've talked with people who are laymen in biology, and it's so easy to convince them into that. it's really a razor's edge.
Yeah.
So I said that yes, when you run into biology people that react with almost a like physical attack upon themselves and react in an incredibly ultra-violent way to the way you have discussed things, those are biologos, because we can't let it happen once. One of our biggest failings was a man named JF, who was a doctorate in biology, which afforded him a large degree of coverage in this in academia.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how that works.
He's a race realist. He is now discredited, which took us a few years, but we got that one too.
I love the aspect of the especially when it comes to scientific communities and kind of like working to police themselves, and which some people do consider gatekeeping.
We are the line.
yeah. But in the aspect, when it comes to how dangerous or kind of how nefarious some things can be used for, you really have to be cautionary with just... letting anybody just say anything and do anything. Right now with the vaccine stuff, you got people, I'm a doctor, I know what I'm talking about. You're a doctor in urology.
You're a dentist.
Yeah, literally. Like, what's that got to do with, like, you don't know shit about what you're talking about.
My favorite is the, we had one person who was in schooling and they were talking about the gay gene, and I was like, do you think that if Biologos knew about a gay gene, we would be letting you say half the shit you're saying? Like, you understand the only reason you're able to spout what you have is because we have no conclusive evidence to what you're saying, so it's all speculation.
Like literally,
If we had a gay gene and you were shit talking it, every Biologos would be behind you going, you're begging for a fisting, boy.
I think I heard something about that on a Vice documentary.
Yeah.
As far as like the Biologos, because of the chlorine dioxide that's being pushed down in South American countries real heavy right now, and a bunch of these, like, I think that was one of the groups was like, this is not okay.
It's like, hey, are you, like, you're literally, one of them was I think Bayer sent defective aspirin to Africa knowing it was defective, but they were just going to pay the fine anyways. And I was like, can you please stop intentionally virus bombing people? We'd appreciate if you stopped.
Would you not do that? But yeah, literally, there's a whole organization with like that. Because I've been, I don't know, most people know that anything to do with like certain dioxides and chlorine dioxide specifically is heavy antioxidants.
Dihydrogen monoxide, water. We're gonna digress. Sorry, we went off on a tangent.
That's true too. Sure.
Do you believe? So I have some comments here from teachers and some superintendent ones. Do you think they should be fired for making these comments as I read them off to you? And then number two, if not fired, what do you think a proper punishment should be? So this is from a teacher, and these are all in court. These are court documents. Okay. Those pants are advertising, young miss.
It's completely inappropriate. Advertising what?
He was very vague about that.
Yeah, it's a body.
So fired or...
No, I mean, disciplinary actions, obviously. I mean, but I wouldn't say fired would be appropriate. I'd say, like, continued education or, like, at least, like, a small amount of time off to do some kind of educational training on behavioral verbalizations and mannerisms.
If the teacher who made that comment hears this and you know who you are, you should be very thankful this woman is far more merciful than I am.
Mainly because sometimes there's a naivety aspect I think comes into that, and sometimes certain people, I guess they're, the people I was talking to earlier, we were talking about this, they're trying to be well-intentioned in a very bad way. To them, especially when they were younger or something, they could see that if that would be an inhibitor to them and success, so then they're trying to, in a really, really messed up way, be like, oh no, this is for your own good. It's not. You're being shitty.
May I call you an irrational optimist?
Yes. And not to say always the case, but I would rather give someone a chance to prove they're not, and then be like, here's your chance. If not, then fire them. They'd be like, if there's a second offense after continued training, like, no, then you're just obviously being a bigot.
Quote, that shirt leaves little to the imagination.
Same situation. Completely inappropriate. Has nothing to do with, like... Although it depends on the aspect of gender of that particular teacher. I mean, if you got, like, male teachers saying that, I mean...
It was a male teacher.
Okay,
the specifics was a gym locker room...
That's completely inappropriate, and that ground is very objectifying and should be taken much more seriously on the instance that, like, you should be heavily evaluated and possibly fired for that, especially when it comes to young women, because, like, teaching them that their body needs to be covered up or should be hidden due to the fact that someone could objectify it is completely demeaning and dehumanizing.
So these next ones are from superintendents and principals.
And even better.
Yeah, they're a little higher up the rank. These are the ones who watch the watchers. They're the ones that can make
decisions. They're the moderators.
and if this gets too much, feel free to let me stop.
Oh, no problem. I'm an open book, honey. You couldn't get me going. I'm one of those types.
Quote, these girls today, man, I tell you, if I was younger, I wouldn't need Viagra.
Oh, God, yeah, that's complete objectification pedophilia right there.
Fire him out of the cannon.
It's just be like, no questions asked, honey. Where's the catapult?
I just imagine like someone saying that in court and just like the judge leaning over, like, the creak of his chair leaning over, and just the Nova cannon awaits you.
It's insane.
We will fire you out of an airlock.
Yeah, literally. Space 'em.
Hook 'em, book 'em, cook 'em. Quote. If they don't want their ass grabbed, they shouldn't be wearing those pants or yoga pants.
Yeah, that's acceptance of rape culture right there. That's just pushing it bullshit.
I would take that as an active admission of what you did, because the guy was on trial for groping. That's another thing too, is that a lot of these women who wear these shorts from confidential exposés have told that they've gone down to the principal's office to deal with this from those very specific teachers who would hold them after class. And then they would use it as forcing them to commit sex acts. So a lot of this was women of color where they were like, you have to stay in school to meet your probation. So it was kind of like, we now have even more power over top of you.
Yeah. ISS was used against certain individuals that I knew when I was younger for that very specific purpose, because it would take outside prying eyes, and they pretty much just, whittle kids out into separate areas where it was much easier to prey upon them.
It also makes you a pariah. So the students won't listen to you.
Yeah, exactly. It happened there. And then also when I had to go to those Christian camps. Oh, yeah. There was another place that activities like that would commonly happen.
So this is from a superintendent in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, we have a bunch of little whores in here. Sometimes I just want to throw a $20 bill at them in the halls.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exact same thing. Just oh my God, I hate to be like too much about those kinds of things, but those kinds of humans, they do not need to be around children, and they don't need to be allowed around other humans.
It's a simple concept of mind over matter. We don't mind you being fired out of a cannon because you no longer matter.
Yeah. 100%. Obviously I'm an irrational optimist. I like to give people second chances, and I like to try and give people the benefit of the doubt. But in certain ranges, with certain individuals, and at certain age ranges, you can't give leniency.
The second chance, but more people.
Exactly. It's too high of a risk at that point. And obviously that's on a scale. It has to be done that way.
For those of you who do not understand what harm relegation or harm prevention is, that's actual harm prevention. Having someone that reintroduction to the system would be worse than if you didn't. That's harm reduction. Exactly. I know that word has been thrown around a lot during this last election by people who do not understand what the word is.
Yeah, a lot of people misunderstand a lot of words.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, but I don't think you think... Yeah. You don't understand the words coming out of your mouth.
and I think this one speaks a lot to... I think you could speak a lot of this as a trans person. Have you ever received public shame for your clothing options? And if so, who predominantly did you receive it from, men or women?
I've definitely received derogatory comments and some really rude slurs, and honestly, actually, some relatively threats.
Oh, really?
Yeah, So, as a trans woman, it's kind of particular that in the beginning of my transition, it was a little bit more common for the derogatory aspects. Where they just kind of make fun of you or kind of put you down or be like, that's inappropriate. Or, say slurs. Oh, excuse me. Once I got further into my medical transition, and I fucking hate this term, but there's not a lot of good other terms for it, became what society considers passing.
Yes.
Kind of thing. It became more into the threat range because there is a component of trickery that people tend to think is involved. Yes. Because I'm tricking them. And I've actually been assaulted over that. And actually in that situation, they were literally quote unquote like where do you get off fucking dressing like that? And things like directly, really being aggressive primarily about clothing attire and things like that, because they felt like that was like a manipulation. And it's all men, all cishet men. Or, on all honesty, and this is a controversial topic, especially within the queer community, with cis gay and cis bi men as well.
Yep.
There tends to be a big issue with just some of the aspects of cis normativity that breeds, I'm not sure, a lack of acceptance or understanding in certain ranges. I have never been bothered by women in real life, as far as in person, about attire. I have been attacked by some TERFs online now.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, and it's been a couple of women, they are pretty orientated to a couple of online pages. And usually they'll try to pick out the weak trans individuals, and so they'll kind of test your page a little bit, and if you resist pretty well, they'll leave you alone. They found out real fast, honey, you ain't testing this fence. I have a dominable will, so you can't
Heart
get
of
me.
steel.
Yeah, you just, my mom tried to she was a really terrible human, really terrible, and she pretty much almost murdered me when I was like 8. And she ran me over a car one time. She tried to throw me off of a fucking ledge one time. Like, she's just a bad person. So, like, through those instances, like, I have this, I don't know, a thick skin, per se. You know?
Well, it's also funny how thin, and I kind of put this up with, and this is a lesson I've learned in school, is that, and it's predominantly white women, and I always kind of laugh at when I'm teaching kids about white supremacist societies, I say that white men are happy to take the burden as white supremacists because they feel that is their job as the male.
They find it an admirable quality.
It's a martyr complex. Like, I will be the target of my will. As soon as you put it towards white women, they have to become really defensive because the men are cute to do that, but the women also, it's like, who do you like in the 1950s? Like, that's how I was raised. Who raised you in the 1950s?
Yeah, literally.
And that, like, and I think Bill Burr said it best when he said, you know, white women, you took the white supremacist blood dollar, you took the patriarchal money, and when you occasionally would sneak off with a black guy and do and get caught, you'd say, oh, it wasn't consensual, when he would get lynched.
Yeah, exactly.
And I said, like, that's an aspect we have to look at. And I noticed with the TERFs is that they really go to that Karen complex really fast.
Really fast. So
and
fast.
even just today, I was actually at a coffee shop this morning grabbing coffee.
And most TERFs are white women.
I'm pretty sure all of them.
Pretty much all
I never considered TERFs to be people of color, only because of I know the extreme religiosity that takes place within the black community. Case in point, Lil Nas X. So I more or less...
There's a couple that I've seen because they are against black trans women within black communities, and so you will find instances there. I've never met one myself. I've only ever maybe seen a couple of instances. But there's a couple of real prominent black trans women that have actually quite a lot to say about the fact that there's certain older religious indoctrinated women and within the culture that definitely have an issue with it. But a lot of that too, like we said before, has to do with indoctrination, other kinds of survival mechanisms. So I'm not justifying it, but there's understanding to the vocalization.
And in that same regard, I've noticed that, I mean, a lot of people are like, why don't you know, I have one video where I take on a TERF, only because it was a biology thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I was like, I more or less let trans people take the lead on that, and then when it's like, okay, we don't want to handle this, Park, would you kindly go be like you know Gail, can you go deal with this for us, would you please? And I'm like I would be happy to. And the kind of thing with that is that's because it's not only my place to decide with that, but also the worst thing a TERF can fail to is a trans person. Yeah, so that shifts the power dynamic. Losing to a white man is nothing to them.
Yeah, it's nothing for them overall. And the fact is, too, like, I like to mention some of that aspect because, especially for trans women, like, we would have nothing without black trans women. Like, they are the cornerstone of queer rights in America and trans women. I mean, and trans healthcare and stuff.
We wouldn't have white people without black mothers. So.
Well, 100%. Yeah, we wouldn't have gynecology without black women.
Right.
We wouldn't. There's so many things that people, especially when it comes to white women, I tell this to a lot of my older white clients. Like, you really don't understand and the things you take advantage of that black women and women of color gave you.
Yeah, Henrietta Lacks especially.
Like, it's so. I like to say it. Some people they get upset, or they get kind of like, I had one of my clients, because I was talking about, it was on the Women's National Day a while back, about how I was so thankful for women of color and things. And she was literally, one of my good clients was sending me this big old message about how offensive that was. And I was like, honey, you don't understand. Right. Like, you take advantage of so many things. And she tried pulling that BS Irish card. Now, I'm an Irish. Any Irish people listening, Irish got a shit deal. Indentured servitude, yeah, sure. It was not slavery. It was not. There was options out. You had things. It was not the same. Please, right. Oh, I hate that card.
So my family actually came over to America in 1922.
Oh, okay, yeah,
in Germany. Pretty much from 1600s to 1900s, we pretty much, my whole family just kind of messed around the French-German border for a few 300 years, and we had a pretty good time doing that. And then there was that little conflict, where Archduke Ferdinand did nothing wrong, and we decided it's not really great to live in a bombed-out shithole that's reeking of toxic gas, and if you go out and dig in the flower beds, you find a French dude. Let's move to America, and we were predominantly of like a mercantile class. We had education. But when we moved over here, it was kind of like, so here's how white supremacy took over Germans. When we got here, we managed to set in a lot of immigrant populations, but because we were white, we could pass through these groups. So we got the benefit of the immigrants, and then we also got kind of like, if there was someone to get uplifted first, it'd be us first. And then as a result, when we moved out west, we burned documents, we burned any proof that we were Germans, and we refused to speak German. And it was because, and I explained to people, this is not because we wanted to hide who we were, it's because we could take advantage of the white supremacist system better as white Americans than as Germans. And Irish are kind of the same thing too. And I know a lot of people do the Irish pride around St. Paddy's Day.
And like I said,
one of my favorite comments is I'm St. Paddy's Day, everyone's a little Irish, bro. And I'll go, he said while being neither Catholic nor Irish.
Yeah, exactly.
If everyone's a little Irish on St. Paddy's Day, or we're all a little Mexican on Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, and the people, they don't really understand those variables and concepts. And it's like we were talking about before, cherry picking, and that's we'll take this and this works for me. Oh, no.
And that thing too is that when I was in school, I explained to students, like, my first relationship was with a man, and of course I knew I associated as gay because I was very attracted to men, and I've had kids like, well, who was your first love interest? And I was like, Teal'c from Stargate.
Oh God, yes.
Chris Brown.
So good.
Christopher Judge. I'm like, that was Kratos.
I love. Especially in the later episodes when you got the gray hair.
And the when he turns around the one time, he's like, Dad, put a shirt on your pokes. So that was kind of my thing for the longest time, and then I've been called a race traitor all over the case. To the point now, I take great pleasure, and also like we had a neo-Nazi come into a store I worked at one time, and I know he was a neo-Nazi because he had the Iron Cross in laurels with the words "Gott mit uns" on top of it, and the little Totenkopf, the Nazi death head. Yeah. And so when I got off work, and my boss knew that I was off work, and I took my shirt off, so I wasn't in uniform, I walked to him and I said, "Hey, bist du ein Letzten? Sprichst du Deutsch? Kommen Sie aus Germany? Warst du ein dicke Gossinger?" And then he's like, I'm like, "Oh, you like Germany, yes? You like Hitler? You like Nazis? Do you have lederhosen?"
I love when people do that. When I was younger, in Montana, I knew a German boy. Sasha, I think was his name. And whatnot. And people used to try to pick on him and things like that and whatnot because of his name and things. And it was kind of funny because, certain groups, especially Montana, with a lot of the white supremacist aspects and things over there, he would do that. Because actually I think he was only first generation for his family. I think his parents were the ones that migrated over. So he wasn't like a fluent German speaker, but was raised in a German-speaking home. So was fluent enough to really understand and would do that to some of these kids. Because over in Montana, especially 15 years ago, there was quite a bit of that white nationalist supremacist BS that was over there. I was raised in a super white supremacist family.
Well, that's also because the Aryan Nation's national headquarters used to be in Sandpoint, Idaho.
And then when the Hayden Lake compounds and
then when the government broke it all up, they just scattered other parts of it. Because it was just at the time rural enough to have no one was going to come looking for you, but also not rural enough where you're not going to have your Walmart and your 7-Elevens.
Exactly.
The funniest thing was I got in a lot of fights in high school over being called dirty kraut, Nazi. And the kids never did it more than once, although there was one guy who did it more than once. He alternated, and he used to call me Schwarzkopf, which is not only a brand of hair product, but it's also a reference to black people in Germany. So I don't know if you've seen the shadow sketching of people.
I've seen. I didn't know the term.
Yeah, so that was the origin of Schwarzkopf, is like when you have the shadow sketching of people because it's a black head. And then, of course, when black people got in there, it's like, okay, black people are Schwarzkopf or Schwarze, which is just black. But it's equivalent to the N-word in terms of, Germany, but it doesn't apply over because in America, it's like we call them black, whatever. So I had a kid who called me that, and I ended up putting him in my car door and slamming my car door on his back. And that was kind of the point. Like, okay, we can't overlook that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of times the teachers would be a lot receptive to being called dirty kraut or Nazi, and then you would, or sauerkraut, and then lashing back at them was like, okay, that's understandable because it is very derogatory. But even still, it's like, is that acceptable because Germans and have that link to white supremacy, and my teacher was a white supremacist, or is that because like they recognize that my own generational trauma as being a German who took the white supremacist system to better their lives in America and Head Start.
Yeah.
So.
It could be a duality. Who knows? It's hard on some of those aspects. Sometimes I think it's more of an acceptance of the fact that it's like it's a cultural thing to where like they don't really feel like it's that. I don't know. It's kind of weird sometimes. You never really know. Sometimes I wish I knew though. I'd like to talk to people and do those kind of things. So explain to me your thought process.
You already answered number 19 with the harsher punishments for women.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the gender code paradigms. We're on that one. So, we got that one too. We have answered a lot of these. Have you ever had a speaker or religious speaker come forward to your school to discuss purity culture?
Yeah. When I was younger, especially growing up in rural there, we had those people that came and talked about the purity rings and all that kind of BS. And
when you dress and reveal clothing, you become pornography.
Yeah, exactly. Where like and that whole like slut shaming thing to where if like you show certain stuff and you're devaluing yourself and like then men won't want you and you're like your value is not on how much a man wants you, honey.
Did they show you the salmon steaks?
No, I don't think I ever got that one. I honestly wasn't paying a massive amount of attention in some of it, and some of it, I'm not gonna lie, being a closeted trans woman, I was very misanthropic and nihilistic when I was a child because I just hated everything because I didn't get anything I wanted.
Right.
And if I did express anything, I would usually get chastised, ostracized, or abused.
So this one I went hard on. It's the guy brought up 4 salmon steaks, and the first thing through my mind is, what a waste of lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
And he goes, ladies, this is like you on your wedding night. If you've never had sex with a partner, and like he'd poke a pencil through the salmon steak. And then he goes like, this is you if you've had sex before marriage, but you still married your husband. Like, like the backdoor policy.
Oh, yeah.
And he had like a slightly bigger Sharpie that's like bigger than this pen. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, ladies, this is you if you've had more than 3 sexual partners. And he pulled up this like giant, like the Sharpies they used to do Black Ops reports.
Yeah.
And just started like forcing it through the salmon like steak, like right in the center where it flips open. I'm like, what? And then right here I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, and he refused to refer to it as a vagina. Like we we the students had to do that, but I'm like, I've never had a lesson where I had to do half the research. And then he goes, and ladies, this is you if you've just had a bunch of sexual partners and you're just shacking up with a man because no one else will have you. And it was like those mini baseball bats, the novelty baseball bats you get at like the fairgrounds, and he was like pushing it through and like pounding the tuna. And I was like, first off, like, can we just have a second to realize that this man is like beating the shit out of this tuna?
You ruined lunch.
Right, but my second point is, and I raised my hand, he goes, yes, young man. And I said, so how is a woman's vagina able to squeeze out a baby and snap back together, but a Johnson's gonna ruin it? And he goes, well, it's because God comes down and blesses the vagina so it can expand like that. And I was like, so did God have to produce like double the miracles to squeeze your fat watermelon head out? Or what? I was like, how does
this work?
And then because I was the effeminate gay guy. I was like, also I've seen most of these guys around here in the showers. Trust me, that ain't happening.
They ain't stretching nothing.
Right.
It all goes back to that one concept.
None of you are Lexington Steel.
Yeah, right. And it's funny because I always like to bring up the point when men would say that, even when it's not in a religious aspect. I'm like, so you can fuck her 50 times and it's alright, but should 50 other dudes fuck her and it ain't?
Right.
Like, what's the difference? It's still $50.
It's like, I mean, like, good luck finding 50. Like, yeah, I could have sex with a bunch of women. I'm like, brave of you to assume you could get that many partners.
Exactly.
I bet you.
But the only way I've ever equated that is there's actually a weird old science thing because a lot of people equate the vaginal muscles to sphincter muscles. Now, sphincter muscles do not retain, and you're like, they're not the same. That's why one's called vaginal muscles, other one's called sphincter muscles.
Oh my God.
Because technically, sphincter muscles don't they will use elasticity. It's actually really unfortunate, but they do.
Anybody who's gotten drunk knows that all too well.
Yeah, exactly. And then so some people, due to scientific literacy, they're like, oh, so it's the same thing? You're like, oh God.
Women pee out the vagina, right?
Oh, yeah. That's another one of those bad women's anatomy Reddits. And it was...
So have your past experience with dress codes shaped how you dressed in like daily life? Is there like clothes like you avoid dressing because they brought you such trauma?
Not because of dress code issues, but there are clothes I don't wear due to my dysphoria.
Okay.
Like I don't wear pants. I refuse. Won't have done in years.
I wish I wouldn't have to wear pants.
Well, you don't. You can get kilts. You don't have to wear pants, honey. Clothes don't have genders.
At my job, we are explicitly revoked from wearing kilts unless it is a holiday that is directly tied to our lineage. So
see, that's stupid.
we have
fun.
It's great for Oktoberfest because I got to wear lederhosens for 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, there you go. I was going to say, yeah, I'm sure there's other options they could get away with, but sometimes you got to push that envelope, honey, before you know.
This is true. Nice and breezy.
Yeah, I love the breeze between my knees.
I was laughing about that with like, men don't wear dresses. Do you feel like you're a Roman? Like, do you have the SQPR thing? Like, yeah, I'm like, so you do understand that Romans used to have leather skirts and they only switched to pants because they went up north and it was a choice.
They had to?
It was a choice between preserving the blessed Roman culture or cold genitals.
Yeah. Well, that, like, they don't realize it, yeah. One of my clients, he's always wearing kilts because he's Scottish. Real thick accent, too, and it's fucking hilarious. And he's got this shirt that says, there ain't pants big enough to contain these balls. I was like, yes!
We had a Scottish teacher, and I think my favorite insult he ever whipped up against a teacher. Well, first off, he used to call me, like, he had an insult for Germans that only Scottish people would get, and then I referred to him as sheep fucker. But we had the rapport. But at one point in time, there was a teacher who, like, he made a comment about, like, you know what, if you know, I was something about Braveheart, and the guy got so pissed, and he had the best insult, and it was all in Scottish, but it was like, oi, you say that again, I'm gonna peel away your inky hide, fashion it into a bag, cut off your legs, whittle out your wee leg bones into flutes, and play a nice jolly tune on the bagpipes. Oh, I'd piss on your grandma's grave. And I was like, there is so much to unpack with this.
Yeah, right, there's a lot going on.
I didn't realize it was arts and crafts hour. Jeffrey Dahmer never thought of this shit.
Yeah, right? Been one out.
Jeffrey Dahmer, eat your heart out. So what we're I think you've talked about ways you push back against the dress code pretty extensively. Did you ever have dress codes enforced on you by school professionals outside of school?
Not directly, but kind of indirectly. So one of the schools I went to, there was religious members from the community that worked at the school, and they also ran the Christian camp. So they would do that, where, like, we had to do that outside, like, because I was sent there for the whole summer, because, like, I was a queer kid, and I needed to pray the queer away, kind of stuff, you know?
Did they have work will may set you free over top of the entry gate?
No, they did not, but they had a lot of other things that they did there. It was rural Montana, little camp, but yeah, it's like they would impress that, and then, like, there was one time, where, like, I was heavily chastised because me and some of the other girls, we were just playing with clothes and kind of thing, and that was, like, a big issue that came up. So, yes and no, I guess, because they did work at the school, and, like, that did come back, because when I went back to school, there was definitely kind of, like, whispers about certain kinds of things, you know, and you're just like, oh, God.
Okay, so this last question kind of is on the back end of our I guess, our practical. And
actually, before we start that, can I go to potty real fast?
Sure, yeah. Do you want to go ahead and take a pause?
Yes.
Okay, and we are back from the short hiatus. So I have a couple pictures here that I will try to throw up on screen when I do the actual video editing. And I'm going to show them to you. So which of these kids in this picture, and this is actually taken from a school board ad that they used to train us on education, which one do you think is breaking dress code? Or which one do you think is, I guess, like, which one is breaking dress code, which one isn't breaking dress code?
I would say that the two in the back would probably maybe considered, like, since he's got sports jerseys on. I've seen some schools where they don't like sports jerseys due to color association senses. Like down in Arizona, there's a school that you couldn't wear green and yellow jerseys. They wouldn't allow those jerseys in the school and kind of stuff. So I'd say maybe that's person.
Damn you, Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, right. I mean, Looks like maybe the flannel with like the loose top button thing might be one of those ones where it's not properly.
So just the two boys with everybody else in the back.
Well, yeah, it seems like maybe her, 'cause she's wearing like a tracksuit kind of thing. Sometimes there was one school in Florida I went to, they wouldn't allow tracksuits.
Okay. So, very good. And sorry to dunk on your parade, but very wrong. All the students are violating dress code, and we'll go through it real fast.
I can see why. I mean, as far as like not tucked in or loose clothing,
so
buttons and things.
And this is also to go to the point of like, most people look at this and go, yeah, they're all passing dress code. So the first gentleman on the left actually has nothing to do with coloring, although like a bright yellow shirt like that could be seen as gang affiliation. But typically that would apply to all students. Typically there are like schools like in Compton, they'll be like, the Crips are a problem we have, so please don't wear anything that can be blatantly covered as that, because we don't need like bloods coming here and seeing that. But actually his shirt is untucked and he's wearing baggy jeans.
Yeah, see, that's what I was associating too with the shirts with the buttons, and it wasn't buttoned at the top. And I've seen some schools, if you don't have your buttons buttoned, then you're like, oh, you can't do that. Button your buttons.
Our young king in the back, you said right, sports jersey, baggy. Sports jerseys for some reason are typically affiliated unless it has like the football jersey, like the name and number.
Oh, yeah.
So if it's that one, but if it's just a plain one, it seems that. And also for football games, they make exceptions.
Yeah.
He also has a unregulated hairstyle.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. I always forget about those things.
The girl behind is actually really interesting. So she has a long sleeve shirt with her sleeves rolled up, which women are not allowed to do. Women, if they're going to have a long sleeve, have to have their sleeves down. Men can have their sleeves rolled up, which is really weird.
Yeah.
It's like if one... I think good for the goose, good for the gander.
Yeah, it has to do with that, invisible skin aspect.
She also is wearing what is considered revealing pants or tight pants.
Oh,
so this is when we found out with men, like the men's rights of like skin tight jeans or form fitting jeans is very like open to interpretation on men. Now I personally think like, okay, they're pants. Like I wear baggy clothes because I tend to have body dysmorphia from time to time. But like skin tight jeans, like if you're like me and you have calf muscles from hell because you're a thrower in track and you can lift 300 pounds in your squat, you're not going to have small legs. You have to wear baggy clothes because otherwise your calves are going to flex out of the bottom.
Yeah, right.
You're going to have Hulk shorts. We're going to have some creepy people come up and asking you to crush me, daddy.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
The boy in the middle with the red flannel, you were correct. So the button-ups have to be buttoned all the way up to the collar. Your undershirt, they can be untucked if your undershirt is tucked in. Now, how you would determine if an undershirt is not tucked in through a longer shirt?
Maybe if it's like all roughly bumped up and it looks, maybe...
Or if it's like sticking out those little triangles they have on the sides, maybe. Yeah, that one's really weird. But also, unregulated hairstyle, he has bangs. Hair has to reveal his forehead. The woman in the back, you were correct. It's a one-piece suit. Women have to wear two separate pieces of clothing. Even with dresses, dresses are the exception to the rule. But it's also a unregulated material. It's a velour tracksuit. This is considered, because when it walks, it makes a swishing sound, and that's distracting. And I'm just like, we are really fishing now.
Yeah, you are really digging at the bottom of the barrel.
We are really going deep for that little potato. The gal on the far right, the far right. She has a couple things. So number one, undershirt is revealed out. Sleeves are down, but she's wearing a hoodie. Hoodies need to be fully unzipped to reveal if you have firearms. Skin tight jeans and satchels. So this is a weird one I found out with satchels. Kids in a lot of schools can't wear satchels. And it's because, they could have a bomb. To which I responded, you could carry it in a lunchbox.
Yeah, you could literally, you could carry it in any receptacle.
But I also found out that this actually stretches back to the 1950s, where a lot of men would take the satchel charges from World War II, which held C4 or Comp B at the time. And they would actually take the Comp B out of the satchel charge and use it for like extra magazines and grenades and munitions, like a musette bag. Then when they would send these bags home to their wives as like purses, and this was known as a GI purse. Women could have because women had to give up leather for the war effort for boots. So this is a very common thing in that, and also the stretchy bands that would go around parachutes when they open. Women would wear them as like the negligee piece to keep their stockings high. Same thing was seen as a GI garter. So the satchel will kind of make sense because it's like, okay, the kid has a satchel charge bag, and that could be triggering to like soldiers, but we don't use satchel charges anymore. It's been a long time
since then.
Right. I mean, I do have a bag that used to be it's a little satchel charge bag.
Oh, okay. I've seen them because my family being,
military
and white.
And white.
supremacists. They had an obsession.
Right. So, yeah, and I have one that I use from time to time, but, like, that one I could kind of, like, okay, but you can have a backpack that's over the side, so it's, like, that's kind of, like, that one made a little bit more sense, but it's, like, also, some people just prefer satchels.
Yeah, we're a lot more comfortable for certain kinds of things.
And if
you're
you're
easier to get off with certain kinds of style clothing and stuff.
And if we're going to allow women to have purses, which is essentially just a small satchel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, some of them are full-size satchels, honey.
Right?
I got one in my bedroom. My whole duffel bag worth of shit, nothing.
That kid's satchel might have a C4. Meanwhile, the woman's purse can hold a frying pan, 2 M16s, a gallon of milk, her entire school bags, and half the cast of the Ice Capades.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of aspects of misogyny right there, because they don't believe that women have aggressive tendencies or have like that. Oh, that's just not this, isn't that? So like, women were really effective spies and covert operatives during the World Wars.
Do you also know that when women go out in the town, they pack a small arsenal in their bags?
I do every time.
Like, I was telling my daughters, it's like, all right, open your purse. We got your taser, stun gun, pocket knife, sheath knife, armor,
items.
Kevlar armor plate, and a small 45 caliber handgun.
Yeah, and that's another issue in which I have a lot of controversy about, because it's so sad that we have to teach our young women that that's necessary instead of taking the extra time and creating a social system where we take the time to show men that your behavior is fucking stupid and wrong and fucked up.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was laughing about is that, and I love dealing with men about this, because men have this thing with firearms. The fact, and this is just because, like, I'm super progressive, I'm super left-wing, and I have bigger, badder firearms than most, like, rednecks.
Yeah.
It's like, they're like, look at my big AR-15. I'm like, look at my belt-fed machine gun that I got on back order.
Look at my Beowulf 50.
Yeah. I have a license for this that you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And the funniest part was, I have guys that talk about stopping power. Oh, stop it. This gun will stop you. It's a man stopper. I'm like, you do understand that term came from the Wild West, where women would buy small, cut-down 45 caliber pistols. Mm-hmm. So when their drunk husbands came home and tried to beat them, they could stop them in one shot.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, no, it's for cavalry officers. I'm like, no. Cavalry officers had 45s because it was easy to manufacture them. Granted, I mean, there's also something to be said about a horse, but... And then I would also tell children about, like, I'm like, keep this in handy when we go to the 1900s and the Filipino War, because... That's also the thing, is that the Filipino War had, I've had so many guys stupid talk about this, like, oh, the Colt's handgun. I'm like, it was a prototype at the time. But I was like, in these wet conditions, these 45 man stoppers would get wet because they didn't seal their ammunition. It was still black powder. So a lot of times these weapons wouldn't fire, or if they did, the bullet would come out very underpowered. And these
your stopping power is really decreased.
the Muay warriors who would fight with bolo knives and ambush tactics could run at these men, and they would start firing with these, Colt pistols, and then of course the bullets would either bounce off, go haywire, or not even fire. And to the warriors, they saw this as like, oh, this is our magic's protecting us. Like, our shaman gave us magic, and it's working. It's
effective.
Right. And to the American GIs, it was something like, God damn, holy shit, what the fuck? Oh, God, oh, this is how it ends. And so this is what caused a lot of them to have usage of bolo knives, but also to take Bowie knives, and which of course the Bowie knife is really like, no one, the guy's name wasn't Bowie, it's just the American pronunciation.
It's the Anglo-Saxonization of the
right. And I was laughing because someone goes, it was a belief of, I think, Colonel Wood, that Maori fighters or the Maui fighters, I think it's Maui, not Maori, but the Maui fighters did their fighting. They could start being a knife fighter at age 10 to be a warrior, but they were so good with it, they're saying like they were born with a knife in their hand.
Oh, yeah.
And this led to men, of course, bad ammunition. Guys keep killing you. You have to prove you've actually killed one. So the way you would do this is either taking their knife in hand combat, because the tribes would allow them to have it, or taking a trophy. Now, ears really didn't work at the time because... you could go and cut off a villager's ear and call it even.
Anybody's ear,
so they started taking genitals. And of course, since you could kill anybody as low as 10 because they were active combatant, typically with machine guns, they would bring them back to their unit because it was a sign of like emasculating them. And then of course, this is actually where the concept of like Asian people have small penises came from.
Oh.
So I've always told my students this, because it's like, yes, when you make fun of Asian people having small dongs, you are literally making fun about mutilating corpses and war crimes.
Yeah. Literally, a lot of people don't know the history or the association sense or the derivatives or origin points of a lot of things.
I also knew how you knew what a Beowulf 50 is, because I know grown-ass, gun-toting ammo-sexuals that don't know what a Beowulf 50 is.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know Alexandria arms and stuff. Oh, God, I grew up in gun culture. My family, they were gun runners. They actually supplied a lot of the white separatists up here and white supremacists with firearms, and actually used to do a lot of modifications on certain weapons, and it's ridiculously easy. And
stupidly easy.
I
think my favorite story was we had a guy who took information off the internet that the CIA used to, like, after World War II, to, like, show third world countries how to make firearms to destabilize nations.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize that the CIA might tamper with the documents in case they got leaked, and didn't realize you need a crossbolt safety on a machine gun, otherwise it runs away.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty fun day at the firing range. That was the first day I ever peed myself.
Oh yeah, it's amazing, some of those kinds of things. You don't know till you know, you know.
As my old priest would say, "You found God real fast, didn't you?" I'm like, well, I was praying to anybody who would listen.
A lot of people are pretty well misinformed, or they're Dunning-Krugers.
Yeah. So how about this one? And I'll be nice this time. There is at least one person that is passing dress code. I know the last one's a trick question.
One person passing dress code, huh?
At least one.
At least one, huh? Yeah, you know, sometimes it's difficult because sometimes it depends on environment and variables. Like down south, there's different, dress codes compared to up north here. It's hard to say. Although it looks like maybe... Well, no, he's got his buttoned up all the way. I'd say he in the back.
The middle guy?
Yeah, the middle guy in the back. He's probably passing dress code.
Alright, so this one here?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So, anyone else?
You know... Potentially maybe her.
Okay.
Just because it's a pretty simple outfit. There's not a lot going on. And, I mean, the worst thing she's doing, considered by most, is showing some legs. So, maybe those two are passing.
Okay.
But,
so,
like, the other ones with, like, her shirt, I would say that could be, like, a crop top issue with the revealing of the upper chest region.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I can't see her outfit very well, so I can't say nothing about it.
we didn't even count her.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay,
so
fair
it's
enough,
just these
fair
four.
enough.
And the gentleman in the middle, this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's passing or not passing?
It looks like, well, I don't know, his button's not buttoned up all the way, so I'd say I'm an if on that one.
Okay, so it's just the guy in the middle who's actually passing.
Oh, fair enough.
So, first and foremost, she has a satchel.
Oh, yeah, totally forgot about that from the last one.
Also, the shorts are mid-thigh.
I was going to say, that seems like they might be high.
They don't go past the fingertip rule. And I was like, how would you tell? And they're like, well, you kind of like measure the arms. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking with this girl here, but hers seemed a little bit shorter, but I guess those are darker, so it's hard.
Us art students will recognize the value of, like, depth perception and perceived depthness. The gentleman, the girl here, I don't think we talked about it in the training, so we didn't cover
gotcha.
But this guy here, he actually passes because his button goes all the way up to the collar. The collar is actually flicked.
Oh, okay.
It's not a satchel. He's just wearing his shoulder bag on his side, and then his pants are shorts, which is acceptable, but we can't see an undershirt, so his outer shirt can be up tucked.
Yeah, see, that's what I was figuring. But the top button would be.
Guy in the back, you can see his undershirt, and so
but isn't it tucked in? Oh, it's not tucked in.
He's also apparently wearing skin-tight pants or form-fitting pants.
Oh, I didn't see that either. I can't really see.
So that was the thing. The big thing was that this is an undershirt, and
it looks like it's black tucked in shirt.
Now, had it been tucked in, it would have been fine. Minus the pants.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this gal, camisoles aren't counted as crop tops; they're counted as undershirts all the same. So again,
fair enough.
It is tucked in, but we can see it. The top is sleeveless, actually.
Oh.
So had she had sleeves on, that would be acceptable, and then of course the shorts. But you can already kind of see, like, this doesn't seem to apply.
No, it doesn't. These are kind of like those one tests they do when you're like, you probably know, when they're serving the liquor and stuff, and they give you that pictures of all the faces and who's of age, and
yes,
it's just like, it's the same kind of concept, and a lot of it really boils down to, I mean, with the age thing, understandable, but with the clothing thing, you're like, why? We're not giving them substances.
It's like, if we consider these things to be like, their clothing is still fine. Yeah. And like my rule with students is like, as long as I can't see your underwear, we're good. And someone's like, so you would just allow a woman to come to school in a G-string? I'm like, okay, so a G-string would be underwear. And my concern would not be that she came to school in a G-string and that people would fondle her. My concern is she has to sit on a chair that like every dude has like farted in.
Yeah, there's like sanitary issues.
Sat on, and I was like, and also like, like, would you really want to put your, like, would you want to put your bare butt on those shorts?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
And some people have controversies on those kinds of things due to like ethnic populations and other kinds of cultures, to where in certain environments and other kinds of things, you know, there's certain attire just has to be, or cultural development doesn't have that objective sexualization of bodies. You know, that's a much more European and northerner kind of thing, to have that sexualization of certain body aspects due to the fact of lack of visibility in cold weather months.
And when I went to Japan, when I was in the northern regions, there was a lot of like free-flowing rivers that were protected and were very clean. And it was very common for dudes to like, in business suits, to roll up and just walk out in like essentially G-string man thongs with a little like censorship slip down the front and just bathe in the river and have a business. They have a little floater with like tea on it, and they would just have a business meeting in the river.
Exactly.
I'm like,
there's no issues with body aspects there.
Right.
But I've noticed that it tends to be certain kind of communities tend to have stronger opinions on those than others, and that's something for me, especially as a woman and someone who's very heavily objectified and sexualized for a large portion of my life. I really don't like the conversation of policing what certain individuals wear outside of safety measures. Obviously, like we discussed before, with tassels, or if you're in a really hot environment working around hot stuff, you barely don't want a lot of exposed skin.
Or a lot of exposed hair.
Exactly, a lot of exposed hair, or keeping the hair up, or for sanitary purposes within medical industries and things.
But do you notice how our discussion leaned more towards the health and safety of the individual?
Than anything,
right? Like,
exactly.
I was like you want to put your bare butt on that shit?
Yeah, the only
I'm sure some people want to do that.
Yeah, the only range it should come into discussion is on the health and safety.
Right.
Otherwise, I really don't think, especially when it comes to like men and other things about women and policing, it really shouldn't have an opinion aspect. Like, they're a body. It should not be objectified. It's not inherently sexual. It can be sexual, but it's not inherently sexual. It's like with nipples on social media.
Oh, right.
You started there. I was told
just Photoshop male nipples.
They said they were going to delete my account.
Really?
Yeah, because there was... No, and that was just for my buttocks. Not even nipples.
Oh, jeez.
Just because I'm a woman and I had too much buttock showing, and there wasn't a band going across my hip to show that I had bottoms on.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah. So you're like... What? So really, I really dislike the aspect of even any policing when it comes to women outside of the safety and healthy aspects. And
let's be real. If you were a cisgender woman who was making them a lot of money, they would allow for it. But because you are a trans woman, they kind of like they use it to hide the idea of the
just women in general on social media. You're like, when it comes to monetization, yeah, obviously I can do that, no problem. They don't have an issue with me doing that. But it's even within AFAB and cis-het women online. Like, there's an image where it's got a guy with his arm up like this and a girl standing right next to her arm up. You can only see the arms and the middle chest and then the nipples. And, literally they will blur out one side with the male nipple, they'll cover it and then post it, and they cover up the female nipple and post it, and literally has nothing to do except for just the nipple. The one post with the male nipple covered and the female nipple out, plenty fine. Well, not plenty fine. That one got flagged. The one with the male nipple out and the female nipple covered, no issues.
Right.
No flagged at all. And so really when anybody, especially when it comes to like these conversations, tries to say, oh, well, even when it comes to this, it's really something that like that still falls into an objective sexualized range of things, regardless of the well-intentioned aspects of it. And really, literally, if a girl wants to come to school naked, that is a health and safety aspect. So, okay, sure, we can talk about that.
But no one would actively do that. Yeah, it's so like you're not allowed.
Like that's one of those conversations. We're like, sure, for fucking 1,000,000 to 1.
The way I treat it is like it's like when I watched that interview with Ben Shapiro saying like, if you pull a knife up to me, you demand my wallet, like that's theft. And I was like, all right, Ben. You don't get to make an example that is so far removed from reality.
Exactly.
It's inconceivable. Of course, Ben Shapiro would never hold a knife up to a man and demand his wallet.
Exactly, and that's where it comes into even those theoretical hypotheticals and stuff, like, well, what if, or this or that. It really boils down to control. It has to do with misogyny and other aspects as well. Obviously, the dress code goes to control as far as men, women, and non-binary individuals. but it really whittles down to control and basic misogyny against women in a lot of instances.
That's also, by the way, viewers, a great way to counteract the what if people is if they start doing the what ifs and the maybes, just respond to them with, is that all you have for me is what ifs and mayhaps? Like
probables.
Yeah, like, how about some statistics instead of your intuitive knowledge of your carnal, visceral natures, you semi-simian troglodyte.
Oh, exactly. So many plebeians out there just running by their basic carnal emotions.
Right, the great unwashed masses.
Oh, God. Oh, I had a client one time, and she was having all kinds of problems because of her husband with some stuff like that. Because it's gay to wash certain things.
I even said that to the incel we interviewed, and I said, one of the things that's really good for, like, me personally was, like, really hot showers. Because it's kind of like when you come home from the day and just shower off and just all the grime off, and he was like, we're, like, caring about, like, yourself. And I was like, no, we're not talking about, like doing foo-foo stuff.
No, we're just talking about basic hygienic practices.
I was like, if you don't love yourself enough to keep yourself clean, for nothing more than the fact that it's a health matter, why should someone else take the time to do that for? Like, if you're not even able to take care of yourself, how are you supposed to take care of someone else?
Yeah, exactly. And not even taking care of other people, but, like, how are you supposed to even work with another individual if you're not keeping up on even just yourself and your end of responsibilities on yourself? This goes back to a conversation I was having with the people earlier about relationships, where a lot of people try to find significant others and partners that they feel kind of they benefit from, or that completes me. And I hate that term. Right. Every human is a whole, complete human by themselves and needs no other human. Is it nice to have support and empowerment in another human? Yes. Do you need them? No. Right. I tell women that too, because it's been so long indoctrinated that you gotta dress a certain way, you gotta act a certain way, you gotta look a certain way, you're gonna be alone, and you're like, and just me and the other girls got a good thing going. Right? So yeah, it's really, really an issue where people even try to discuss those things.
I kind of love that insult that, like, women have used. I forget what I saw on TikTok with Husband Hotel, but it was like some girl walking down the street, like, dressed the way she wanted to be, and kind of like the attire that was seen as, like, she gets slut shamed, and someone throws, like, a burrito or something at her, and she goes, did I just get assaulted by a chalupa? And this gal runs by and she goes, you're never gonna have a husband, and she just turns like, yeah, that's why I fuck yours.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, yes.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. I even had that trope used against me by a police officer, actually, at one point. So before I got my ID changed over, speaking of dress codes, this is what plays into it. I had an instance where people were harassing me because one of them recognized me on social media, and they knew that I was trans, so they were trying to kind of give me shit. Well, I was at a gas station, and the gas station attendant saw that I was being harassed and actually called the police. Well, this was right over in Post Falls area, right across the border in Idaho. And I was traveling through, I was just stopping for gas. I was driving an old 83 Chevy.
Oh, Jesus.
It was real pretty. So you know how those rural boys that over in Idaho.
Oh, yes.
So they were sorry, it's a pretty girl like you with a truck like that, and yada yada, this basic bullshit. Well, when the one boy started making fun of his other friend for calling me pretty, that's when they started, really getting aggressive. The cop shows up. I don't know where the fuck he was, but he was close. So everything's okay until IDs come out, because, obviously everybody's asking for IDs. Well, this was in the process of my gender mark and name change. I had almost got it finished. I was just waiting on my ID to come in the mail. I was mad. So he sees my ID and then literally laughs, like scoffs at me. And he's like, well, what do you expect dressed like that? Oh my God. And you're like, did that just happen? In 2020? Like, did this just happen? That And then they left. He gave me my ID back and left.
Yeah.
Just like, oh yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's your fault for being a little whatever. And you're just like, and that's just, in this day and age, the fact that is still a predominant ideology within certain men and certain communities, it's fucking baffling, and bleeds right into this, where it's like, what do you mean, dressed like what? I was literally dressed just like this. I was wearing one of these outfits.
And it's also interesting, too, because when I lived in Idaho, I worked at a bar, and it was an outdoor canteen in a college town. And, of course, college frat boys, we're rich. It's like, you're high middle class and boy.
Yeah, best.
All right, your daddy makes 6 figures a year. Let's just start and stop with that. And I explained to him, I was like, he kept jumping over the fence and bringing outside alcohol in, which not only is number one a crime in a lot of places, but it's also grounds for me getting in trouble, because you're distributing beer without a license.
Exactly.
And so I told the guy, I was like, look, I know you're having fun. I'm going to be straight with you. I'm just going to take your 30 rack of Coors here. which you probably don't want to be caught with anyways. I'm going to go put it behind my board. When you guys leave, you guys can have it back.
Oh, yeah,
I was like, and then he went and got his friend, and they brought him another one. He jumped the fence. I was like, okay, I'm taking your next bit. Okay, let me explain this to you. You're on strike 2. If you bring another pack of Coors and jump through that hole in my little fence lattice work, it's already kind of bowing because it can't take human weight. I was like, I'm going to take this belt off my pants and I'm going to whip you with it, like your daddy should have 14 years ago. And there was 2 off-duty cops, like they were in uniform, but they knew who I was because I hung out with them from time to time because it was a small college town. The cops lived in town, so everybody knew who they were, and they had so many people in and out of the drunk tank all the time. One of them pulled up one time and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, watering a bunch of dudes who were passed out in front of my stoop, and I was like, watering the drunks. And the kid did it one more time, and I literally pulled my belt off and started like literally paddling him, like, you know, I was like, I told you this was coming. And so, you know, he got done. The cop was like, all right, stop. And I was like, hey, pull your IDs. And the guy goes, okay, well, you know what? Technically, what you were doing was wrong. Technically, he assaulted you. 2 rights. We're gonna cancel each other out. He goes, why don't your friends just take your beer and go? And he's like, well, I'm gonna press charges. And the guy goes, so you understand that if you press charges on him, we have to put in a federal police report, which will go to court and be on your record for permanent record that you were physically bringing alcohol into a bar and the bartender bent you over a table and spanked you with his belt. And we will use the term spanked, all while saying to the tune of, I told you this was coming. He goes, that will be on your permanent record. When people Google you, it will come up in your court documents. And he was like, you're also going to spend a night in jail because you're drunk and you have to get worn off. And he was actually like stopping you from committing a crime. Oh, yeah. He goes, so the worst we're going to get him for is like minor battery. The worst what we're going to get you for is public indecency and providing illicit permission of a controlled substance. Oh, yeah. He's like, so he's going to get maybe at worst. He goes, if we push it, 3 weeks in county. He's like, you are going to get at least 6 months in county. And he's like, okay, I'm good. I'm like, cool.
Yeah. Most people, they don't really realize, or they have this individualized sense that they're more important than others. But that's indoctrinated.
Those cops are still bastards, by the way.
Yeah. Most cops.
Sorry, I gotta get the point. Issues. Even though I did hang out with them in the bar from time to time.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with those kinds of things, especially coming from my family, because at one point when I was younger, I was literally by a police officer. I was underage, got caught with paraphernalia and substances. My family name he thought was cool because of the white supremacist aspect of it, and literally was like, well, I'll just put all the charges on the other kids and you go. Yeah. I mean, I'm an underage kid, so I'm like, fuck yeah. Yeah. Shitty behavior, don't ever do that. But literally, like from a very young age, I've always very much well known that, the policing system is not very well policed.
I mean, the fact that police get to use weapons that are war crimes lights you off.
The fact that they get, old military equipment is just
and the other thing, too, is like, and I've seen this now, growing up when I was a kid in school, if a cop came to your school, someone royally fucked up. Like, that was like someone brought a gun, or there was like drugs.
When I was in school, we used to always have cops in school.
Right, and that's another thing too. Is I'm like, how are kids supposed to feel safe when you got cops patrolling around, and then you're like, oh, there's no school to prison pipeline, as the cop stands directly behind him.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of issues.
And prepares to unzip his fly.
Yeah, there's all kinds of problems that comes into that. Then there's the systemic issues of the rap sheets that get wrapped up on underage kids that just. Stupid. That's another whole conversation for different aspects. And then it comes into attire, which comes into this because of the affiliation of certain communities.
And how about this picture? We'll go back to the dress code. This final one. This one, I know it's all from the back end, but this is apparently supposed to teach us because, like, sometimes you're going to see students walking away from you. Again, there's at least one person in this that is passing dress code.
Oh, yeah. I would say maybe this one's the only one.
In the middle? Okay.
Yeah. Although, that's a dress, ain't it?
It is a dress. It's the shirt and dress thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. So this one.
Just that one?
Just the dress one.
Okay.
She's wearing form-fitting, all those other thingies.
So,
that one's way too short.
So once again, the 2 men are the only ones who are passing dress code.
Oh,
so yes. we'll go through it. Right. So booty shorts off the top.
Oh, okay. I was just looking at butt, so that is a boy. Oops.
Yeah. Right?
Well, hey, got some cake, honey.
That is a child, madam. I don't actually know. These are
these stock images are usually not.
That was the weirdest thing. I was like, this looks like a Kohl's ad.
Yeah, I'm like, no, they're not.
So booty shorts off to the top, but socks shoes no socks. Mm-hmm. Apparently that's a problem. But now we get over to the guy. He's wearing anklet socks, and the other guy's also wearing shoes no socks. But that's okay for men to do.
Yeah,
because men get so turned on by that ankle,
Yeah, ankles. You gotta keep them hidden, honey. I have that problem with clients. They can never keep themselves.
I unfortunately am not grifted with ankles. It's just calf muscle into foot. But yeah, booty shorts, shoes, no socks. The other guy, even though his backpack is slouching off his back, it's not a violation. Shoes and socks, wearing jeans, that's fine. His shirt is tightened, so we assume it's buttoned all the way up. And
a lot of assumptions going on in this little one.
It kind of cut off the top of their heads when I cropped this because I didn't want to have all the text on top. But his collar is actually like very tight to his body and thick up, so he has like the Catholic priest thing. So that's class. The other girl, shoes with no socks, but she is wearing jeans under a dress. So it is a dress, and the thing is that you can wear leggings under dresses, but you can't wear jeans.
Yeah. Well, that and I saw the jeans, and they're form-fitting anyways.
Also, short-sleeve shirts.
Oh,
Dresses have to be long-sleeved. Or you have to have an undershirt underneath them, like a
I've heard of stuff like that. I've never experienced myself, though.
Gentlemen, same thing. Pants are fine. His shirt can be loose on top here because we can't see a undershirt underneath, so we assume it's tucked in. And I was like, again, making a lot of assumptions here. So he passed.
Well, for the boys.
Yeah. Naturally. And now here's the one for the girls. So she's wearing booty shorts, obviously, because you can't see them beneath her dress. And if she wasn't, her dress would be too short. But sleeveless dress.
Oh, yep.
And shoes, no socks.
Yeah, I remember seeing that there. Yeah, the shoes, no socks. I did not know about that one. That's news to me. But unfortunately, I can completely understand it. Justifying it.
So now that we've kind of done through that, I'm gonna read off a list of words, and I just want you to say like yes or no to if you think it fits. So the dress code is sexist.
Yes.
Transphobic.
Yes.
Misogynistic.
Oh, of course.
Ableist.
Yes.
So this is from one of the classist.
Oh God, yes, 100%, twice.
So I found out that the cheapest school uniform in school that was federally regulated at the time of the study was $60. It was undershirt, plain white cuff shirt, blue jeans, and a pair of like nice dress shoes. And the cheapest one was $60, and that's what kids had to wear. And it was like, it wasn't an official dress code, but it was like, you have to have these components, but no specific brands. Yeah. The most expensive uniform in the country I could find was $6,000 to a private school. It was $6,000 per student. It was a 4-piece suit, and you had to wear it. They were monogrammed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you had to have at least 3 of them. So $18,000 down just to go to the school in just uniforms.
Yeah.
Which
really see that.
Yeah, I was like,
equates over societal aspects.
Because some people, we had a couple interviews that said, "Oh, classes, this isn't a thing." I'm like, okay. Bigoted.
Yeah, 100%. It's totally bigoted because it doesn't allow any leniency for things.
Draconian.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
I've been told it was a little dramatic.
I mean, we need a little sensationalism in there, but I can see equation.
Oh, good stories deserve a little embellishment.
Exactly.
Oppressive.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Restrictive, and this is in terms of like physically restrictive.
Oh God, yes, 100% physically restrictive. Some of those uniforms are ungodly uncomfortable.
Starch is not your friend.
Yeah, exactly. It's not good for your skin neither.
Gynophobic.
Yes.
Homophobic.
Oh, 100%.
Regressive, and this is in terms of like American-centric culture. Okay.
100%, honey.
Purity culture or purity-centric.
Oh yeah.
Quote unquote white.
100%, because white people have some pretty drab ideas about aesthetic sense of attire.
Well, they rolled up on the Aztecs, saw those fitted headdresses, and a nation that nationalized cosplay, and we're like, we should put an end to this.
Yeah, right. And I can understand certain environmental variables that dictate certain things, and lack of certain resources to have pigment colorations and other things. But to try and impress that upon as a aspect of correctness is BS.
I had a student that she, for Kwanzaa, actually wore a traditional African garb with the Nigerian headdress head wrap, and she had all these pretty colors, and I was like, wow, your dress is so amazing.
Yeah.
It's because I'm colorblind, so I love colors that almost hurt to look at. Like when there's so much going on, I like to have my senses. I like to have my senses thoroughly bombarded. Like I love bright colors. I loved the Color Out of Space on Netflix because it had that really weird purple that just fucks with your eyes. With me, it went double hard. So I was like, oh, this is fun. I found there was a live action Speed Racer makes, and I watched it first, and then I went back and got some
Yeah, don't watch that if you have epilepsy.
I watched that with some suspicious-looking blue cave mushrooms, and
yep.
And it was so much better. So I realized that. So her dress with all these styles and colors and patterns, this is amazing. She goes, now watch times when I twirl. It was like almost like this menagerie.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher that just went, I just don't think that's very appropriate for a dress. Like, that's not very pretty to me. And I was like, and I literally wheeled on her and went, bitch, you teach art and your kids are in the middle of a Picasso segment.
Yeah,
like
what?
Have you seen Jackson Pollock?
Yeah, do you know what expression is?
Sometimes.
Especially from an art teacher. But I'm not going to lie, a lot of what we talked about with teachers and control aspects and art teachers specifically, I have a big issue with art teachers. Because they are so biased.
They are on the chopping block, don't worry.
As a self-employed professional artist, I have a big issue with art teachers.
It invalidates personal identity.
100% yes.
Weaponized.
Yes.
Traumatic or trauma-inducing.
Yes.
Burdensome to the society.
100% yes.
And mentally, physically, and spiritually suffocating.
100%, and was usually to do that.
All right. Well, that just about covers up all of our topics for tonight. I'm so fantastic. I could have you here for this.
It was a pleasure.
And this will be up very shortly, and I'll send you a link.
Yeah, send me a link, tag me, do whatever. I am all about that.
And is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners before we go?
I always like to tell everybody, don't let the bastards grind you down. There's a lot of things that inhibit us in the world, and don't ever let people try to use that to invalidate you. When it comes to expression, attire, trying to your point of view on those things, like I try to empower. So don't ever let the bastards grind you down.
You are loved, you are kind, you are important.
100%.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.